Well, I'll go ahead and call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. And we're ready for a roll call, please.
Marie Jones,
Here.
Bob Harris,
Present.
Ricardo Guthrie, Mary Norton,
Here.
Marshall Camp,
Here.
Ian Sharp,
Present.
Carol Mendino.
I don't know how I got to the bottom of the list, but I'm here.
Thank you. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled before the commission today. Due to open meeting laws, the commission cannot discuss or act on items presented during this portion of the agenda. So if there's anybody that would like to address the commission on an item, I'm sorry? Oh, I always do that. That's on an item that's not on our agenda today. Please let Tammy know, or anybody? I don't see anybody. So next we need the approval of minutes for March 8th, our last meeting.
This is Commissioner Mandino, and I move to approve the minutes from our March 8th meeting as written.
Thank you.
This is Mary Norton seconding.
Thank you. Any discussion? Changes? Okay, thank you. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we have the public hearing.
Marie, sorry to interrupt,
Yes.
but I just want for the record that Ricardo is online, and I'm not sure if he said that he was here when I called.
Oh, okay.
But can you just verify that you're online, Ricardo?
Presente, I am online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our first item A is a conditional use permit for the Putt Tech. We're ready for a presentation. Bob?
I need to recuse myself as I'm the contractor on record for this project.
Okay, thank you very much. And please join us again when we move on.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Alexandra Pucciarelli. I'm the current planning manager at the City of Flagstaff, and I'll be presenting this project to you tonight. This is a request for a conditional use permit for Putt Tech Flagstaff. The property is located at 3126 East Route 66. The proposed use is approximately 1,600 square feet of a pro shop, so retail, and then some concession area, as well as an 18-hole miniature golf course. The request is for a conditional use permit. These are, it's considered an outdoor commercial recreation facility, which requires a conditional use permit in the highway commercial zone. Here we see the proposed site plan. There is an existing 1,500 square foot building that used to be a convenience store associated with a gas station. They're proposing a small, like 12 by 12 foot addition at the rear of the building. They will be reusing the existing parking area, but the 18-hole miniature golf course will wrap around the front and the back of the building and eliminate a lot of existing impervious surface, like where the canopy used to be and the gas tanks and stuff now become miniature golf. Here you can see the proposed elevations. So they're really reusing this existing building. It's a concrete block building, a low-slope roof. It's going to be painted, a new overhead door in the back, like one of those garage doors that they can open up and have this sort of indoor-outdoor space. So for a conditional use permit, there are 3 findings. So the first finding is that the conditional use is consistent with the objectives of the zoning code and the purpose of the zone in which the site is located. So as I stated, this is in the highway commercial zone. And the highway commercial zone, among other things, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's primarily located along commercial corridors of the city, with the intention of making the city more attractive as a tourist destination while providing needed commercial activity. The highway commercial zone allows outdoor commercial recreation facility uses with the CUP. And the purpose of the CUP is to provide a process for reviewing uses and activities that are permitted in a certain zone, but require more discretionary review to make sure that we're mitigating any possible impacts. Finding number 2 is that the granting of the conditional use will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare. Staff believes that if the proposed project is developed in accordance with our codes and requirements, that it will not be detrimental. Finding number 3 is that the characteristics of the conditional use as proposed and as it may be conditioned are compatible with the types of uses permitted in the surrounding area. And the CUP shall only be issued when the commission finds the applicant has considered and adequately addressed the following 9 topics to ensure that the proposed use will be compatible with the surrounding area. So now we'll go through all those 9 items. So topic number 1 is access, traffic, and circulation. So primary access to this site will be right off of Route 66. They're utilizing an existing driveway, but they're actually going to update the driveway to current ADOT standards. There's an existing second driveway that'll actually get filled in and become more sidewalk. And the on-site pedestrian and bicycle network gets improved. There's going to be a sidewalk that goes from the building down to the now more continuous sidewalk along 66, as well as they're providing bike parking, but I talk about that later. Topic 2 is adequacy of the site. Neither civic space nor open space is required for this project. It's not located in the resource protection overlay, and there are no resources on site to save anyway. And it complies with the development standards of the HC zone, including setbacks, building heights, and that floor area ratio. Topic number 3 is noise, light, visual, and other pollutants. It's not anticipated that the proposed use will create any noise, visual, or other pollutants into the area. Any exterior lighting that they propose will be required to comply with our outdoor lighting requirements that are fairly strict, that enables us to be a dark sky city. Topic 4 is the style and siting of the structure and relationship to the surrounding neighborhood. So because they're using an existing building that was served as a gas station for so many years, the building is not, we always are pushing this building forward idea that buildings should be up close to the street. This building is not, but they are reusing existing buildings. So that's why it's like that. It does eliminate, it used to be that cars could drive all across the front of this property, but now they're relegated to that east side where the parking is, and now we have this beautiful putting green in the front. The proposed building style is in concert with the majority of development along East Route 66. Topic 5, landscaping and screening. Final landscape plans get submitted with civil plans. So those landscape plans will be reviewed by staff. They'll be required to meet our standards in the zoning code. The applicant is providing a 15-foot landscape buffer all along the back because this property is adjacent to residential uses. So that provides a nice buffer. They're also providing additional landscaping along the front, as well as one of the conditions, and the applicant actually agreed to this, is to provide a low wall along the front to help screen it from the street and provide that separation. Topic 6, impacts on public utilities. So this project will just be using existing utilities that are already servicing the site. Because they're proposing, as part of their concessions, to have a kitchen element, they'll be installing a grease interceptor, which just helps protect the city sewer infrastructure. Topic 7 is signage and outdoor lighting. The developer intends to reuse the existing monument sign located at the southwest corner. The elevations we looked at earlier show proposed signage areas on the building. Those, they'll have to submit for a outdoor, or a permanent sign permit. Anyway, they'll have to get a sign permit for that. It'll have to meet our standards. Same with the lighting, as I talked about, that gets submitted with building permit, so they'll submit a separate permit for that. Topic 8 is dedication, development of streets. Not relevant in this case. We have the Route 66 right along the front. There's no requirements for additional dedications, like for any turn lanes or anything. And topic 9, impact on resources. As I said, it's not in the resource protection overlay, and the existing building is less than 50 years old, so we're not concerned about historic building. As far as public participation, a conditional use permit is required to hold neighborhood meetings. The applicant did have a neighborhood meeting on February 15th of this year. 3 members of the public attended. The applicant addressed any concerns or questions that they had. The applicant requested that the director waive the second neighborhood meeting, which we did. Staff has not received any comments from the public in regard to this application. So, recommendation. In accordance with the findings presented in this report, staff recommends approval of PZ 20-00212-03 with the following conditions. The development of the sites shall substantially conform to the site plan as approved by the interdivision staff on August 22nd of 2022, and that they provide a low wall or alternative equivalent between the putting course and the landscaping to prevent golf balls from going off the property and onto Route 66. So that's all I have. If you have any questions for me.
Thanks, Alex. Any questions from the commission? Start with Mary.
I just wanted to say that, this is a great recreational opportunity, and I went to your website, and I found your courses really attractive and well done. I did have just a couple questions about the lighting standards. I'm assuming since there was a reference to lighting zone 3 that this application came in under the previous lighting zone or lighting zoning code.
Right, and usually when your site plan gets approved, it kind of locks you into the zoning code at that time, so we could review it under that previous lighting standards.
Okay, great. And then I was wondering if you could describe the fencing on the west side of the property. I didn't see any description on what that would be next to that RV motorcycle repair shop. And secondly, in the neighborhood meeting report, you discussed hours of operations with concerned citizens. I just wondered if you could tell us what the hours of operation would be. Thanks.
And I'm going to defer to the applicant to answer those unless he needs my help.
All right, any more questions for Alec? We can ask the applicant if he'd like to talk to us about his project. Is the applicant here?
He's
Oh.
online,
Oh, I
but
can't
he's
see.
muted.
Okay. We can't hear you, so make sure you're unmuted.
There you go.
All right, can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hey, this is Cameron Howell. I'm the main owner in Putt Tech, the company, not necessarily. My partner, Kyle McCain, is a Flagstaff resident. He is a part owner in this project called Putt Tech Flagstaff that we're anticipating doing. So I appreciate the kind comments about the other courses that we've built throughout the country. We're super excited about this one and the beauty that will come. I don't have right in front of me the hours of operation, but I know that we documented them, and I believe that the plan was to not go any later than 10 o'clock. And we discussed that with those few residents that were there, and everybody seemed like that would be reasonable. And so I know it was an hour later on the weekends, and then 1 hour less on the weekdays, but I can't remember if it was end at 9 and then end at 10 is what I believe it is. But our overall goal of this entire project is to have a very family friendly. We're specifically not going to be open on Sunday. We're not going to be ever even considering the idea of adding alcohol. And so this is just going to be for the opportunity for people to come have a great experience, eat a little bit of food, and hopefully laugh and enjoy. As far as there was a question about the fence on the left side, and I know Kyle would be able to answer that one better, or one of the designers that we have. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like.
Okay, is that good enough? Okay, great, thank you. And Commissioner Mandino, you had a question? Oh, I thought you did. Any other questions from the commission for the applicant or from staff? Commissioner?
I just had a question about, I know that it was stated that a fence would need to be installed to keep golf balls off of 66. I think my concern would be, and maybe I sound like the old Grinch, right? But kids start horsing around, they start hitting the balls onto 66, and it causes a traffic accident. So just kind of wanted to explore just a little bit the fencing and just what sort of monitoring will there be on the actual course, just to make sure that, we don't end up having a 5-car pileup on 66.
I can comment on that if that's okay.
Sure.
So first of all, I know on the west side there's a chain link fence there, and our plans are to improve the view of that to make it look better. On the Route 66 side, the anticipation is to build some kind of a barrier that's higher than the putting course. Absolutely. And that would, protect the course from people just randomly walking onto it, but so that no golf ball would be able to go. In addition, you'd have to look at the actual design, but the way that I've sketched the course out is that a majority of the holes run east to west. And so they would run not directly towards the street as well. And so even if you hit one too hard, it would never end up on the street, if that makes sense. So, but there's definitely going to be a barrier between the putting course and the street, so that unless somebody picks up a ball and decides to chuck it, which I don't know how we'll be able to completely eliminate, all mischievousness, but absolutely there will be somebody there patrolling, just like you would on a regular golf course, like a course marshal that's out there making sure that everybody's playing at the speed they need to. If anybody's holding somebody up, that the next group could go through. that kind of, and making sure that everyone's safe and complying with, our requests as well. So I know the other thing is too, there's a 10-foot easement that's built in there also. And so we're even set back from the street that much further. So we plan for I believe there's some landscaping and some other things kind of planned in there to sort of soften the space too. But definitely, a wall barrier of some sort that's going to be raised much higher than the actual course.
Sorry, I'm not used to this, used to my computer. Do we have any public comment on this item? I don't see any. Everybody's here for something else. Okay, so is there any more discussion before we ask for a motion on this item? Okay, we're ready for a motion if anyone has one.
I'll do one. I move to approve the conditional use permit PZ-20-00212-03 for Putt Tech to approve their conditional use permit request with the, in accordance with the findings and the conditions.
Thank you. Any second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. All right, any more discussion before voting? Okay, all of those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you very much. So the next item on our list is the specific plan request for Northern Arizona Healthcare. But before we get into that, I just wanted to mention, because there are a lot of people here for this, oh, I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't wait till you sat. A lot of people here for this item, and so I wanted to just kind of give you some rules about the public comment. After we go through all the staff reports and the official information, we will ask for public comment, and everybody will have, any individual will have up to 3 minutes to make their comment. And if you happen to have a group of 10 people that you're speaking for, a minimum of 10, then you can speak for 10 minutes. And in order to make a comment, there are some cards in the back. I think we use the tan one for speaking, and the blue one if you just want to leave a comment but you don't want to speak. And you can bring those to Tammy here right on the end, and she'll deliver them up to the dais and make sure you're heard.
That's Becky.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said Tammy. To Becky. Okay, so we're ready for you now. Tiffany, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Commissioners. Tiffany Antal, Zoning Code Manager for the City of Flagstaff. Tonight I'm here to present the NAH Health Village project to you. I have wrapped both cases into one presentation. I will warn you, this is a lengthy presentation. I'm going to go through it as fast as I can. Please feel free to interrupt and ask questions as they arise. Because this is a lengthy conversation, you might forget that question as we go on. So I want to make sure we get to your topic. I also have team members here to support with this case. So while they let me come up here and speak for everyone, I am not the lone person working on this. This is the culmination of a couple of years of work for the entire IDS team. Tonight, I do have representation from our Parks and Recreation PROS department. It's Park Recreation, Open Space, and Events. I've got representatives from our Transportation Engineering Group. I have the fire chief here, and I think that's the bulk of the folks that I have, because that's where I am thinking your comments are going to come from. So I do want to reiterate that there are 2 public hearings on this application. So this case will be also heard on April 12th. That particular hearing will be held at the Aquaplex. So no decision needs to be made tonight. We did drop off, we basically gave you a lot of information that you needed to absorb in a fairly small time frame. Our goal tonight is to walk you through this project. If there's more information you need, more specialty information you need from other team members or from the applicant, we'll have time to prepare that for you by the April 12th meeting. I was going to say August 12th. I think we're going April 12th. All right, so here we're going to go. We're going to get started. So here is the property, the NAH Health Village. It is addressed 1120 West Purple Sage Trail. The proposed use, and we have broken this project into two phases. For phase one, it is basically 1.15 million square feet of hospital and medical offices, which also includes an ambulatory care center, and 31.2 acres of open space and civic space. Phase two will consist of supporting uses, including approximately 315 residential units as part of a mixed-use development, approximately 230,000 square feet of non-residential uses, and approximately 250,000 square feet of research and development uses. Those non-residential uses can include hotels, also other medical offices, and supporting retail. So this request is broken into two separate requests. When we do get to the April 12th meeting, you will need to make two separate motions. The first case is for the adoption of a new specific plan. That specific plan will cover all 172.6 acres. However, that specific plan will be for phase one and will only include zoning modifications for phase one. Second of all, we have a concept zoning map amendment, and that zoning map amendment, which is a rezoning of only 98.39 acres. The property is currently zoned rural residential and estate residential, and will be going to highway commercial and then public facilities. We will also be adding 3 parcels into the resource protection overlay. There's 3 small parcels not currently included. So let's talk about the property context and the area where it's located. It's the area, the helpful 172 acres is outlined here in blue. You have Fort Tuthill located to the south. You have I-17 and Beulah located to the east. To the west, you have surrounding large lot, single-family development. To the north, you're going to see the communities of Mountain Dell, which is an unincorporated community that is under the jurisdiction of Coconino County. There are some also vacant lands that are zoned single-family residential. And as you move further, you're going up towards University Heights. Over past, on the other side of I-17, of course, you have Ponderosa Trails. And you are also moving down further south towards the airport and additional research and development lands. So let's talk about what the purpose of a specific plan is. The purpose of a specific plan is to provide a greater level of detail for a geographic area or element of the regional plan and to provide for the systematic implementation of the regional plan. Specific plans can also be adopted as master plans for development when they accompany a request for rezoning. The development of specific plans is essential for implementation of the Flagstaff Regional Plan and its vision. These plans are necessary to further determine the nature and scale of activity centers, corridors, neighborhoods, the cross-sections and alignment of future corridors, and the priority of goals and policies in a particular area. In this case, this specific plan is serving as a master plan for this development. It will be adopted by ordinance. It will include some specific zoning modifications. I'm skipping ahead of myself. Here's the regulatory framework. This specific plan is going to divide 172.6 acres into 7 land use areas. Each of those land use areas will have their own zoning category and intended level of development. So tonight, for the rezoning, we're looking at land use areas 1A and 1B, and then land use area 2B. So I'll just go over these really quickly. Land use areas 1A and 1B are the areas in green. They are open space areas. The 1A is open space area that surrounds the existing Sinclair Wash Foot Trail. And then 1B is designated as a wellness retreat. It is an area for respite for those visiting the hospital. Both of these areas will remain available to the public. Area 2B is also subject to the rezoning tonight, and this is the hospital site. This will include the hospital building itself, the ACC and associated medical offices, as well as a parking garage and the parking field. So jumping back to land use area 2A, this is designated for mixed-use development in the future. This is where residential development is currently intended to go, along with some other potential commercial development. Then you have land use area 2C, which actually sits within that hospital piece proper. It is intended for commercial development, is also proposed in the future to go to highway commercial, is likely intended for a hotel. Hotels are a supportive use to a hospital, especially this being a regional facility. This allows people to have a place to stay while they're using the facilities of the hospital. Area 2D is also looking at highway commercial zoning. This would be a mix of potentially medical offices as well as service uses and general retail. Of course, not everybody enjoys eating at the hospital cafeteria. Some people really like it. Other people like to have options. So, some of the uses that might come in and support this as well are other general service uses that can support the people that are utilizing this overall area, as well as some restaurants, places to go outside of the hospital itself. And then land use area 3 is designated for research and development uses, which would include research labs, training, and education, as well as potentially light manufacturing. So Arizona revised statutes provides the authority and scope for municipalities to adopt a specific plan. The specific plan may, in addition to recommended zoning ordinances and subdivision regulations, include regulations determining the location of buildings and other improvements with respects to existing rights-of-way, floodplains, and public facilities, regulations of the use of land, buildings, and structures, the height and bulk of buildings, and structures in the open space around buildings and structures. The proposed specific plan includes modified standards in regards to some of these features specific to this development within the NAH Health Village. And those are regarding building placement, allowed uses, building height, architectural design standards, and bicycle parking. Additionally, the plan modifies a definition for public or private meeting facilities. So we'll run through what these modifications are. And in addition to going beyond what the goals and policies of the regional plan are, remember that this area is located within an activity center. And it is highly encouraged for specific plans to flesh out what these activity centers would look like. NAH is coming in and not just planning their hospital, but they're planning for what that activity center around that hospital would look like. So let's talk about the zoning code modifications. The first one is in regards to our site planning design standards. Our site planning design standards require building forward or anticipate or want a building forward design. This means we want the building as close to the street as possible. In this case, the hospital is on a site that's almost and will eventually be surrounded by right-of-way on all sides. So that would leave staff to working with and figuring out what's the primary street frontage, where to place that building. Beulah most likely represents that primary building frontage or that primary street facade. It is the primary arterial road, although Woody Mountain Road that will travel through the project as well is also considered an arterial road. But in light of all of these considerations, the hospital struggled with locating the building closer to Beulah and has proposed locating the building central on the site due to constraints with noise from the airport as well as I-17. So this little diagram sort of shows the bubble or the area of which sort of left a good realm for the hospital to be placed in regards to those particular facilities that already exist. Next up are architectural design standards. So the city applies architectural design standards that are meant to represent the design traditions of Flagstaff on all commercial projects. NAH and the hospital is no different, but the hospital being a different and unique building and having unique construction components to it, the applicant can go into this in much more depth better than I can. There are some requests in regards to our architectural standards. The first is to allow additional EIFS or stucco on the exterior of the building. Our current architectural design standards limit EIFS to only 25% of a facade. This can be really difficult on a building of substantial height. There are also additional architectural reasons that the team can go into for you on why EIFS is a good product in regards to how the hospital itself is constructed, but that is the first change to our standards. I will tell you, you don't have the site plan in front of you, and the site plan is not formally part of this application, but I have it in my office. And I know that EIFS is limited to the patient tower of this, the primary use of EIFS. There are smaller portions of EIFS, but EIFS extending over 25% are limited to that patient tower, which is the tallest portion of this building. Secondly, the NAH guidelines modify the building and massing scale requirements to remove the specific requirements for articulation. And the reason that they're doing that again is because we have this patient tower. It doesn't allow for the same articulation as a commercial building. And because this building is much taller, our articulation standards of working with percentages of the height and how far our building moves in and out became really difficult. So NAH was able to work with us to prepare their own architectural design standards specific to this use and specific for the reasons of it being a hospital. Other zoning code modifications include increasing the requirements for bicycle parking and adding a requirement that 20% of all of the bicycle parking provided on site be covered. Additionally, we're amending a definition. So one of the uses that NAH has considered as a surrounding supporting use is a conference or meeting facility. Currently, our zoning code doesn't have a great definition for a public meeting facility or conference center. Our public or meeting definition actually excludes conference center, so that became kind of problematic, and it best fits in this. You're liable to see a code amendment come forward to change that in the future. But for their particular purposes, they're going to go ahead and amend that definition to make sure that conference center is explicitly permitted in the future. In addition to those small changes within the zoning code, there are specific changes made to the two different zoning categories that are proposed for phase one. Public facility zone, and I know that's a funny name for open space, but because there is an active recreation component included and the Foots Trail and everything else, that's what actually puts it in a public facility zone as opposed to a public open space zone. Our public open space zones are really limited to passive recreation, or more active recreation is located in public facility. So land use areas 1 and 2 are proposed to be rezoned to this area, to this particular zoning category. NAH is proposing to amend the allowed uses of the zone to prohibit the development of libraries, museums, residential uses, cemeteries, government offices, government service maintenance facilities, and municipal airports. So really, they're just restricting the allowed uses in the zone. They're not adding anything. They're just limiting overall what could be developed on this site. All other listed uses remain the same, and I can tell you that list is fairly small. So it's going to leave them with really that active recreation component. None of the public facility zone buildings, form, or property development standards are modified as part of this plan. So the highway commercial zone standards. NAH is proposing to amend the use of the HC zone by prohibiting most of the uses that are not compatible with the proposed hospital and ACC uses. The hospital is modified from requiring a conditional use permit to being a permitted use. So in every zone in the city, hospitals are a conditional use permit. They are permitted nowhere by right. A conditional use permit is considered a permitted use, but does have to go through that additional process. In this particular case, we were already doing so many entitlements for the specific plan and the rezoning. It didn't seem valid to also require a conditional use permit on top of that. Also, all of the uses and any of the uses listed as permissible within the HC zone on this particular parcel need to be accessory to the hospital and ACCUs. For example, daycare center is still listed as a use. It works just fine. It's considered accessory. You can see a hospital in and of itself is like a little village, right? They're gonna have a cafeteria, it's open to the public, it's a restaurant. So there are a number of uses overall that are still listed in the highway commercial zone that clearly are meant to be subordinate and accessory to the hospital. The hospital really is the primary use of this site. There is one new use that does get added to the HC zone, and that is for airports and landing strips, heliports and helistops, because there will be a helipad on the hospital. There is currently on the existing hospital. That helipad will be located on the patient tower at its highest location. The helipad will have to go through all of the required FAA permitting. It does get placed, like I said, on the top. There's no service maintenance or refueling happening here. Again, they're very close to the existing airport, and they do work with the airport in regards to traffic control. The primary helipad user will be Guardian Air. Other changes, the building form and property development standards are modified to allow a maximum building height of 160 feet. Currently, the maximum building height is 60 feet. A footnote is added stating that that 160-foot building height is limited to patient towers. So as we go through, and you'll see some images that show you the patient towers. There are future expansions proposed of patient towers. But all other uses will conform to that 60-foot maximum height. So the bulk of the hospital itself does fall within that 60 feet. It is the patient tower that is over. I will tell you 160 foot is conservative as part of the request for NAH. And a lot of that has to do with how we measure height in Flagstaff. We measure height as both the highest and lowest. Basically, we're gonna measure, if you grade down, we're gonna measure from down below. If you add fill, we're gonna add the fill into the overall height. So we're probably one of the more restrictive in terms of how we measure height. So with that being said, they wanted to be a little bit more conservative, but the building itself, as I've seen to date, is around the 142 at its highest points, and overall around the 112 foot. So there are some appurtenances on the top of the building that go up to that 142 foot height. The reason why the patient tower, the applicant gives the reason for the patient tower being a taller height is because vertical orientation provides a greater efficiency than a horizontal layout for patient care. The applicant has also provided a view shed analysis of what the proposed tower will look like from surrounding properties, and they include scenes from their surrounding. I'm just gonna go through these pretty quick. You've seen them in your packet. This is if you're flying up in the air. They kept wanting to give them to me as if we were all flying up in the air, but I'm just kidding. I did get them to bring it down to earth. But this actually gives you the best feeling and representation. So you can see here, this is the phase 1 hospital tower. It is oriented east to west. Those rooms all take advantage of that dramatic view to the north. And then, of course, a future tower is angled north to south, sometime in the future as additional hospital beds are necessary. But you can see that those are the two portions of the building that would have the height. So this is what the view would be from Mountain Dell. I know that there's a lot of blurring in this image, so you just kind of have to ignore it, but that arrow is really pointing at where that hospital would be within that scenery. You're not seeing a lot of the hospital. This is meant to be the view from Sinclair Wash Trail. This is where you're gonna see a good portion of that hospital tower. This is the view from Getaway Trail, which is sort of the residential area to the west of the proposed hospital site. Again, as you move further and further away from, as you get closer and closer to the hospital site, of course you're gonna see it. As you move further and further away, the less likely you will be to see that building. This is the view from Woody Mountain Road. Of course, this is going to be the arterial road right next to the hospital. It's going to be one of the more prominent views of the hospital itself, but looking from basically from the street view in. And then this is the parking lot within Fort Tuthill. This is the parking lot that gets you to the bicycle park and as well as where Flagstaff Extreme is located. And you can see just based on, and this is sort of taken from a human scale looking up, again, the view is very limited because of where the building is set. And lastly, this is Ponderosa Trails. It's not going to be seen from Ponderosa Trails. As part of the specific plan, there are a number of community service impact analysis required. These include police, fire, economic development, parks and recreation, schools. I'm just gonna run through really quickly. A lot of this information, these are pretty wordy slides. A lot of this information is in your staff summary. If you need me to slow down, you can slow me down. But the Flagstaff Police Department waived the requirement for an impact analysis. They did provide this general feedback. In general, providing police support for the proposed new hospital will be the same type and scope of service provided currently to the existing hospital. The project plans anticipate a hospital that eventually may have about 1/3 more capacity than the existing facility. So it's reasonable that the Flagstaff Fire Department cost of service will also increase. The Flagstaff Fire Department does not separately track its cost for servicing the existing hospital. The new hospital will be about 4.6 miles from the Flagstaff Police Department headquarters, with a distance of only 1.8 miles to the current medical facility. This may result in response times a couple minutes slower than currently provided, and the extra distance will have a marginal cost impact to the department. This expanded distance will play more into the effect of when they have to deal with jail refusals, and they give us the numbers of what that looks like when basically the jail requires medical clearance before they'll take someone into their facility. I'm gonna cover the fire. The fire chief is here. You can stop me at any time and he can jump up here. He might also grab me and throw me to the ground if I say anything wrong. I'm just kidding. We did a lot of impact analysis in regards to fire. Their first one is a wildland fire risk assessment and mitigation report was completed. And this was completed by the Fire Management Group, LLC. It addresses the possible wildland fire impacts of placing this complex and basically within the wildland urban interface. And the study recommends a series of mitigation measures for fuel management, building materials, as well as general recommendations for the proposed village development to reduce wildland fire impact. One of the things I think that the public can clearly see is the property has been thinned. NAH has worked with local forest groups and I believe they received grant funding to move forward with thinning that property. I know at times we did conveniently place a sign on the property to try to convey that that was only meant to be fire thinning and wildland fire thinning. The property needed to be thinned regardless of whether a development is approved or not approved. It does enhance and increase the safety for the city overall as a whole. That is not the final cut of the trees that will need to occur for development. There will be more cutting of trees to accommodate development, but that work was not made permissible. Signs were posted on the property to try to let the public know that work was not commencing on the site. So just wanted to reassure everyone that work has not commenced on the site. It is just a thinning project, and that was done in conjunction with other community groups in Flagstaff. Additionally, There was a NAH Health Village Fire Impact Assessment completed by Facets Consulting that the city received in December of 2021. And the purpose of this report is to provide a comprehensive fire service impact assessment. So this is really helping us to understand what are the impacts to our fire department, how will we be able to serve this site. There were 4 specific recommendations given from this study. I'm going to pay attention specifically to number 3, which is given the expansion of the urban core to the south and possible follow-on development in the area, which most likely is that John Wesley Powell 4th Street corridor area. They recommended that an analysis of the Flagstaff Fire Department fire station locations, station capacity, and service delivery depth be completed to determine if the existing station locations, apparatus, housing capabilities, and emergency service capabilities were appropriate for the long term. So that takes us to the 3rd study that was completed in regards to fire, and that is a standard of cover analysis. This was also completed by Facets. So we already had a consultant working in regards to potential development within the John Wesley Powell corridor. NAH added on to that contract, and the resulting study was completed. The findings of that report are that the Flagstaff Fire Department does not meet the minimum staffing requirements of relevant national standards and best practices. Given the city of Flagstaff's risk profile, regional importance, and limited surrounding mutual aid resources, the city of Flagstaff should work toward full compliance with these standards. We currently today don't meet these standards. The high-rise tower affiliated with the NAH Health Village demands additional response units beyond what would be required for a lower risk occupancy and accentuates the need for a fully staffed ladder company for the city. We don't currently have a fully staffed ladder company. We have two ladder trucks. They are shared staffed. The closest fire station to the proposed NAH Health Village is Station 6. The report recommends that a second emergency response unit staffed to national standards be provided at Station 6. The proposal here is to move one of the 2 existing ladder trucks to Station 6. The problem is that Station 6 is not suitable for additional emergency response units. So Station 6 is located on Lake Mary Road. It's one of our smaller stations. It's our only 2-story station. The site is really limited. Looking around that site, it's not going to be possible to add an additional bay, to add that ladder truck at this site. While staffing could be managed there, the ladder truck will not be able to be accommodated. It looks like that we'll need to potentially relocate Station 6. It is very important that that Station 6 stays within that immediate vicinity. So we are still working through all of those final details of where that fire station will be, but you will see in the conditions of approval and I can't remember which case it is, but in one of the cases, there is a specific condition of approval that there will be a fully staffed ladder truck to serve this particular hospital, and that if station number 6 cannot serve or meet that need, then a new fire station 6 will be developed.
Tiffany, can I ask a question? It
Yeah.
might be for the chief.
Okay.
I'm wondering about the difference between a ladder truck that's, appropriate for most cases in Flagstaff and one that might be appropriate for 160 feet, or maybe let's assume it's 140 feet or something like that. But at any rate, a 6-story building. Is that the same equipment? Is there different equipment?
It is. Thank you for the question. The ladder truck that we currently have, we have just, in fact, replaced them. They're on order. The bad news is it's now taking 36 months to get one in today's environment. But the equipment is the same. The difficulty is staffing. There's a high-risk occupancy due to its nature of its high-rise. In addition to that, it's institutional, which is to say that the people in the building are, in many cases, non-ambulatory. So it takes more firefighters to deal with the non-ambulatory occupants of a building, and it takes more firefighters to move equipment and firefighters to higher levels whether it's an emergency medical call or a firefight. So it's not so much the equipment, it is the ability to staff and have enough firefighters arrive at a risk of this nature. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, that helps. So the assessment you did and the recommendations you made, that accounts for those needs in particular for the patient towers?
Say it one more time, please.
You made an assessment and you made there are recommendations listed in the conditions?
Yeah, I believe the recommendation verbatim is on the slide in front of you, and the consultant's recommendation kind of confirms that we need to locate more resources if we're going to have this risk at that part of our city, which we've never anticipated, zone rural residential. And so to address that risk, we need to not only move a ladder truck piece of equipment in closer proximity to the hospital, but we need to staff it. And I will say that that's not the only staffing need we have in our system, but the consultants kind of directed what are the impacts of this use on our system, and the staffed ladder truck was a part of that recommendation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Camp?
So I had a question on, when I was reading through all of the information that we got, the new ladder truck that was needed is 9.5 million, and then to staff it would be 2.4 million each year? And then on top of that, we would need a new fire station. So I guess I'm just,
I'm not looking at your report. If I can see what you're looking at, I'll take a quick look, okay?
Sorry, I'm an accountant, so. And I think my question is, who's going to pay for all of that?
I just have the operation and maintenance cost.
Thank you. So to clarify, the 2.4 million annually, that's operating costs. That's what it would take for us to staff, bring on enough staff to operate that additional company, is what we refer to them as. And so that's an annual cost. It includes a bit of operation and maintenance. It's personnel, primarily it's personnel-related cost and employee-related expenses. And there is a little bit of what it takes us to equip a firefighter and train a firefighter and all those, but it's predominantly EREs. It's predominantly employee-related expenses. Who's going to pay is the subject of great debate, and it's currently going on right now. And our city managers and attorneys are working with the applicants' team and their attorneys, and that question has not been resolved yet, but everybody's working real hard on it.
So I pointed out the obvious.
Wanted to kind of tag on to that. So since this campus is located right on the city edge and right next to the county, is there any collaboration or partnership going on with county coverage and, Highlands Fire, things like that? Or does this just stay within and shouldered by the city?
So, we have an automatic aid system where we collaborate on a high level every day with our partners. There are different staffing levels and different expectations of what some of our partners would bring. We took that into consideration as we evaluated and worked with the consultants. And so while the collaboration exists on a daily basis, it was just difficult to say we're always going to get the staffing complement we're trying to achieve with our automatic aid and mutual aid partners. So the consultant focused on city resources. They did talk about, if you think about the Summit Fire and Medical District, which we also administer and provide management services for, and they did talk about the fact that we could not necessarily rely on all the resources of the region to respond to a risk of this type. There's not enough. But just rest assured that collaboration goes on. We just had a difficult time saying that it was reliable enough and certain enough to count it towards a response to a risk of this nature.
So if this were not 160 feet high and it was spread out more, would that be a lower cost to the fire department?
The fact that the location of it is on the edge of our infrastructure, does that make sense? Our system of fire stations, it still presents a large risk. It's institutional in nature. It's on the edge of the system. I've got less trucks that can get there in a timely manner than I do at the existing location. And so, yes, it's a risk. If it's not high-rise, it's better. I mean, in just life safety context only, not whether that's functional for the applicant, but just in a life safety sense, yes, that's a little bit better, but it's still a high risk and it still creates problems because our system never anticipated that intensity of risk at that location.
And this one might be more for Tiffany. So as this analysis was made, and you may need to pop in on this too, but as this analysis was made and things are not up to standards, and they took into account the JW Powell corridor as it connects to 4th, and obviously there'll be fire coverage that's needed for all of that as that is developed in the future. I would imagine that's complicating things here. If Station 6 is too small for that section of the city, is there another station that's needed, that we're going to be needed along the JW Powell 4th Street corridor? Obviously, Station 6 needs to be bigger to respond to the hospital. I'm seeing multiple problems here.
Yes. From a system standpoint, trying to respond to the growth of the city and, implement the general plan, yes, those are concerns. But we did think that was a worthwhile question. We went to the consultants and we asked them if they could kind of do a little micro-analysis on the suitability of what we refer to as the J.W. Powell Future Fire Station, as that roadway is constructed and developed and it opens up that new corridor of development. And the response was, and not terribly surprising, but the response was it's too far away to deal with the risk posed by the applicant's proposal.
So I just want to clarify one thing, and that is in my staff summary, I go into more detail about overall all of the staff that we would be looking at needing in order to service the hospital, but they're not just specifically related to the hospital. Like this study says, we're currently not meeting national standards, and there's some things we need to do to improve that. So with an additional ladder company, for example, comes an additional battalion chief. And so there's lots of different components of this in terms of the staffing needs. I just wanted to say that that 2.4 represents 15 staff and not the 9 staff that are necessary for a ladder company. So just as a point of clarification. Okay, I'm happy to take it if you want. Okay. So yes, like you heard, we are still working through the cost component, but the important thing to recognize here is that as a condition of approval, it is clearly stated that a fully staffed ladder company is required in order for the hospital to be built. So regardless of who pays for it, it's required. It has to happen.
Okay, so that was what my question was. I did see that in the conditions of the rezoning, so it's required, but the funding has not been settled as who's paying for what.
That's
and where the money is coming from.
Right, and that might not be settled until we're in front of council with that development agreement. And so I was gonna get to this towards the end, but I'll get to it now, is that I've included a lot of conditions that I wouldn't normally include because I don't have the development agreement further along. It's not atypical to be in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission without a development agreement. That is that contract agreement that is between council and the developer. We like to tell you what's going to be in it so that we can offer you some assurances. But I've gone ahead and added those things as conditions to cover what you would normally see in a development agreement, in case we can't get to agreement. That's how staff could get to meeting the findings. As that development agreement moves forward and we have the answers of what's going to be in that contract label, most of these conditions will come out and go straight into that development agreement. Okay? All right. So let's talk about community service impact for analysis for schools. I'll just keep it short. The amount of residential dwelling units here are not going to trigger any immediate needs. FUSD probably needs to look at a school somewhere in this vicinity. They did not ask us to reserve land for a school specifically within this project site, but liable if there's when one thing comes, other things follow. And so as other development happens, this is probably going to need to be a consideration for this area. In terms of, and I know that the applicant will spend a lot more time on economic impacts. There was an economic impact analysis. You know, there are substantial construction expenditures over 23 years expected for the overall development of the health village itself. The project construction could support over 10,000 direct jobs and 3,200 indirect jobs over that 23-year period. Once the entire health village is developed, it could generate an annual economic impact of $387 million in the region and could employ an estimated of 1,985 people at build-out. An estimated $113 million in direct labor income, annual off-site visitor spending, because again, this is a regional facility, $9.8 million by 2036. The jobs generated by the health village could support an estimated local population of 2,600 people. Approximately half are estimated to live in Flagstaff. And the health village could generate an estimated $39.1 million in sales tax. Just important things to note, NAH is a nonprofit. So they, as a nonprofit, they don't pay property taxes in the same way that other for-profit entities do. That is a process they have to go through and have approved with the county assessor's office. The city has nothing to do with that. You know, additionally, the hospital exists, so it's not a big new boom of employment that we're seeing overall, but it is existing employees moving to a new site. But the surrounding health village development is likely to enhance that employment for the Flagstaff area. Community service impact analysis parks. So parks are also one of the required topics that we need to analyze in terms of looking at a specific plan. In terms of, we ended up using the Flagstaff Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which already identifies deficiencies in public parks. And we know that we are deficient overall as a city. We're deficient in active recreation sports fields. But we know especially that we're deficient in this location. And as well as other community recreation facilities such as the Aquaplex. In working with NAH, PRO's staff has requested that the applicant further their goals of the master plan by providing additional resources that would fulfill the community needs. The applicant has agreed to make the open space areas designated within the rezoning request open to the public. And additionally, PRO's staff requested that some form of active recreation amenities. Think of Buffalo Park, you've got workout stations, that kind of thing. There are all kinds of cool ones now where they're sort of like an active gym located. It's an outdoor active gym. We're hoping that NAH is going to be willing to incorporate this type of amenity into their wellness facility. Our pro staff would be willing to partner and cooperate on grants in the future if necessary. But that is basically the result of the parks analysis. I would tell you pros would love it if NAH would just build us a whole recreational park, but it's not something we can just put directly on this development. Certainly was discussed. So that is the big bulk of the specific plan, and now we get to the rezoning. So the rezoning itself, like I said, is in the 90-acre range. We've got 63.18 acres to be rezoned to highway commercial, 35.21 acres. You're gonna see these numbers sort of fluctuate because I go in between talking about gross acres, which is the total land with the right-of-way, and then what the end-up parcels are gonna be. When we talk about rezoning, it always goes out to the midpoint of the right-of-way, so they're gross numbers. Of the 14 parcels included in this request, and it's not a full 14, it's portions of, it's a full 8 or 10, and then it's portions of other parcels. 3 are not currently located within the resource protection overlay, but those remaining 3 will be added in as part of this rezoning. The remaining areas, that 3, 2D, 2C, 2B, they'll all be rezoned. You'll see me here again. You'll grow bored of listening to me talk about this project. So here is the conceptual land use area program and how it breaks down. The rezoning request is to permit the development of a new regional hospital, ambulatory care center, and associated medical offices, as well as that 30 acres of open space. The first phase of development includes the hospital itself is 751,000 square feet. The ACC is just over 200,000, and you've got just under 5,000 square feet of parking garage. The first phase of the hospital will include 276 patient beds, which is 35 more beds than the current hospital. The hospital is designed to have a secondary tower. When that secondary tower is built, you're liable to be in the 468 bed range, 468. So resource protection, the entire planning area will be in the resource protection area. There are no floodplains, there are no steep slopes on this site. So the primary resource we need to work with is the forest resource. Like I said, the property has been thinned. They're only required to preserve 30% because of the zoning categories. They will easily meet those resource protection requirements. In terms of open space and civic space, there's no requirement to have this open space. This is something that the Health Village has been adamant about throughout the development of the site. This open space is well placed. It provides a buffer between the hospital itself and the adjacent rural single-family residential development. The open space also surrounds an existing foots trail, which just helps preserve that particular area. Civic space will be required, but it will happen on a development by development basis. So as each piece of this Health Village develops, we will deal with those specific civic spaces. I can tell you within the hospital site, there's lots of little civic space areas within their landscape areas, and there's lots of places for people to move around within the hospital, to sit, to absorb and be outside, even outside of the wellness area. Landscaping and outdoor lighting, we don't typically see them at this level of entitlement case at this point in time. There is a very detailed landscape sort of document in your paperwork. There really aren't many issues in regards to landscaping. The one thing that I can tell you is that there are very specific conditions in here to increase sort of some landscape buffers. In this regards, it's about maintaining fire-wise landscape buffers around the foundation of the building, which was a recommendation of their particular fire studies, and then increasing the buffer to allow more of the resource natural trees to be used as landscaping along the frontage along Beulah. Outdoor lighting, also typically don't see those plans until we're getting closer to final construction documents, but the outdoor lighting standards, they're going to meet our current standards. They remain in lighting zone 2. There were some concerns from the Naval Observatory about so we don't regulate internal light of a building. We only currently regulate the external light. There was some concern about what that might look like because the building and the patient tower, and those are all rooms with windows, will be able to be seen from the Naval Observatory. There were some concerns in regard to light spilling out of those windows at night. NAH has agreed to put shades on each of those windows that would be on an automatic timer. There are also architectural elements added for on each of those windows to also help shade that light. So the applicant has worked to try to resolve those issues. Otherwise, they'll be attempting to meet all of the outdoor lighting requirements. There may be some differential needs at the emergency room, but we continue to try to work through those issues. Parking calculations, the The hospital has one set of parking calculation, the ACC has its own separate set. You can see the general outline over here. This is where the parking garage is located, and this is where the parking field is located. The parking garage is intended for employee parking. The parking field is really intended for the visitors coming to the hospital, patients, and the like. The parking garage has its own separate entrance, and then there are multiple entrances into the larger surface parking field. That surface parking field also gives NAH to reconsider how they might want to redevelop or add onto the site in the future. It gives them that potential of other uses. Parking garages are expensive, but they can be added to a site. If another parking garage were, say, to be added, then other commercial uses or supportive medical uses could also then eventually be added to the site. They are over parking. The current hospital they don't like our parking calculations, I don't know why. We don't park a lot of hospitals, it does happen on occasion, but the current hospital is underparked. The NAH has been using parking up on McMillan Mesa and has been shuttling employees to the site for some time. They want to ensure that that's not an issue. Because hospitals generally need people to transport via vehicles. Bicycle parking is also required to be provided. The applicant intends to provide both customer and employee bicycle parking spaces, including indoor spaces within the garage. Bike and ped circulations. I'm going to call down Martin. Are you in the room? Martin Ince is our multimodal, or you should be active transportation planner, right? What's your title? Multimodal, all right.
Thank you, Chair Jones, members of the commission. Tiffany introduced me. I'm Martin Ince. I'm the multimodal transportation planner for the city. And I'll just take a couple of minutes to describe in high-level terms what the pedestrian and bicycle circulation system looks like for the site. And I'll break it down into three components: foot trails, bikeways, and then pedestrian access. And Tiffany covered a little bit of this, but I'll go into a bit more detail about each one of those things. So first on foot trails, Tiffany's referenced a couple of times, there's an existing gravel surfaced foots called the Sinclair Wash Trail to the east of the site that provides a connection generally between Woodlands Village and Fort Tuthill. Because that trail is unpaved or aggregate surfaced, it doesn't do great as a commuter facility. It's unusable for significant periods of time during the winter. Still, even as a recreational trail, it's important for us to provide connections between the hospital site, different site functions, and that trail. And for the few months out of the year when it is useful as a commuter trail, I think a lot of people will use it as well. The second trail is one that is planned along the west side of Beulah Boulevard. And that actually extends north and south from the site all the way from Lake Mary Road down to John Wesley Powell Boulevard eventually. And because that trail will be paved, and we think it will serve as the main commuter route for people who are walking or biking from town out to the hospital and to the facilities around it. Because it will be the main commuter trail, it's important to consider the connections between that trail and various site functions. And currently we're looking at two main connections, one trail connection being along the main driveway that connects from Beulah onto what we might consider to be the kind of the primary entrance area of the hospital. The second connection is a little bit further south, and it connects from Beulah directly to the parking garage. This connection is important because there will be a lot of indoor secure bicycle parking in the parking garage. So any employees who are commuting to the hospital by bike will use that route to get to that bicycle storage in the parking garage. A couple of nuances for the trail along Beulah. At the north end, there's an existing segment of trail called Sinclair Wash that's directly below Lake Mary Road, connects to Lake Mary Road. It's currently aggregate surfaced, unpaved, But again, to function as a good commuter trail, it would need to be paved as part of the project. The other nuance is that toward the south end of the project area, we have an existing trail called the Sheep Crossing Trail that includes an underpass under I-17. That will get relocated and rebuilt as part of the widening of Beulah. And when that happens, we need to be careful about how we plan for those two trails to connect. So the existing Sheep Crossing Trail and the new trail along Beulah will want to connect. That tunnel will get lengthened and moved to the west. And we've been working with the applicant or asked them to consider opportunities for civic space or some amenities at the west end of that tunnel to make it more inviting and kind of a gathering place and more functional as a transportation facility. That's Foots Trails. On to bikeways. The main bikeways in the site are along Beulah. And here, in addition to the paved Foots Trail on the west side, we'll have buffered bike lanes on the street for more experienced cyclists who want to be in the street. It also provides a way to get out to some road rides in the area for people going past the site. On parts of Healthcare Boulevard and potentially Purple Sage, we are working with the applicant on a concept called separated bike lanes. This is a configuration where we take the bike lane off of the street and attach it to the sidewalk. So it's separated from lanes of traffic by a parkway and a curb. This type of facility is much more comfortable for people who are less experienced as cyclists or who are not as comfortable riding on a street in a bike lane adjacent to fast-moving or heavy traffic. This is a relatively new concept, this configuration, although it has been used in different parts of the country. The city's Bicycle Advisory Committee has spent a good part of the past couple of years talking about and planning for this type of configuration. We are, as a city, planning on using it as part of our future roadway projects, including Butler and Lone Tree. Overall, if you look at the specific plan and what's planned for bikeways, it fits into and helps us implement the city's overall bikeways network plan that was recently adopted as part of the active transportation plan by City Council last fall. Last item is pedestrian circulation, and here for the roadways, we mainly rely on street sidewalks for pedestrian circulation. Of course, when we get onto the site, it's important to provide connections between those street sidewalks and different on-site facilities and features to make sure that we have good pedestrian circulation throughout the site and throughout the area. We also ask the applicant to consider planning for crossings. We always run the danger of if we build roads that are difficult to cross and don't provide or plan for places for pedestrians to cross, those roads can become barriers. So we're trying to kind of head that off as part of the project. So I don't know if you want me to stay for questions or turn it back over to Tiffany.
Do you have any immediate questions on that? All right, now, I thought I moved that. All right, so next up is historic and cultural resources. There was a cultural resource report prepared. There are some small features on the west side of the property. Those features specifically are preserved as part of the open space. It is portions of an old railway line and some old fencing details. That's the bulk of the resources to be preserved on site. And that takes us now to our TIA, and I'm gonna ask Steph Santana. Good afternoon, I'm Stephanie Santana. I'm the Transportation Engineering Project Manager here at the city. I will be providing some detail and information specific to the NAH traffic impact analysis. Just for a brief overview, a transportation impact analysis, also known as a TIA, and how I'll reference it throughout the slides, is a document that analyzes the development's impacts on the roadway network. NAH has expressed many times that this is a regional hospital, meaning people are coming from the west, Kingman, from the east, the reservation, from the north, the reservation, and from the south, Camp Verde-ish, all to receive state-of-the-art care.
Most trips will be vehicle trips, although there are a number of shuttle services that will be provided to local shelters and Mountain Line transit stops. A hospital of this magnitude required looking at the city of Flagstaff as a whole, and that's why the TIA includes roughly 32 study intersections that spans from the west city boundary, the Flagstaff Ranch traffic interchange here, and all the way to the eastern city boundary country club interchange over here. Scoping this TIA took a total of 1 year. The city coordinated comments with the Arizona Department of Transportation, Coconino County, Metro Plan, and the Transit Service Mountain Line. The pre-scoping document was officially approved in February 2022, and NAH got started on their TIA right away. The TIA was prepared by CivTech, a company from Phoenix that has written many TIAs that the city has reviewed. NAH expressed that this healthcare village is different from anything that has been developed to date, and that the typical trip calculation tools do not account for a village-type use. They explained that a patient may come to the ER, then on the same site get an x-ray, have surgery, and be able to pick up prescriptions. All of these should not count as new trips because it is all being done within the campus. This is considered internal capture, where multiple uses are included on one site, and the trips may be reduced on the external roadways. According to NAH, there would be a higher trip reduction taken on this campus, and the city agreed to calculate internal capture using 3 different levels of reduction, where our typical practice is only 1. In the original TIA, there were 3 different horizon years that spanned over 40 years, 2025 to 2065. The 2025 included the hospital, the ambulatory care center, medical offices, a hotel, restaurants, retail, and a conference center. And all of these uses are projected to generate approximately 27,000 new daily trips. For comparison purposes, Butler, just east of Sawmill, has a total of approximately 28,000 daily trips. So NIH will be adding to Beulah the same vehicle volume that exists on Butler today in their first study year alone. By full build-out, they will be adding approximately 53,000 daily trips. This map shows all the intersections that NIH has analyzed in their full build-out TIA. The intersections highlighted in red require improvements in the 2025 study year, along with the widening of Beulah to 4 lanes and the widening of John Wesley Powell Bridge over I-17 to 4 lanes. All but 6 of the 32 study intersections required some type of mitigation. Due to the compressed timeline and the complexity of the TIA, NIH requested to shift to a phased TIA process, allowing them to move forward with mitigating the impacts of just the hospital and ambulatory care center. Phase 1 utilized a 2027 study year and is projected to generate approximately 15,000 new daily trips. This does not include the medical offices, retail center, restaurants, a hotel, or the conference center that was in the original 2025 study year analysis. These other uses will be moved to Phase 2. The Phase 2 build-out TIA and project development is expected shortly after Phase 1 is constructed. Permission was granted to allow the specific plan and concept zoning map amendment cases to come in front of P&Z prior to having an approved TIA. The scope for the Phase 1 TIA was reduced by the transportation engineering staff to only include the corridors and intersections that were most directly affected by the project. The required Phase 1 improvements include the widening of Beulah Corridor to 4 lanes from Woodlands Village Boulevard to John Wesley Powell, and specific intersection improvements along the Beulah and JWP corridors. The Phase 1 2027 TIA includes the agreed-upon mitigation, is expected to be resubmitted very soon, and will be reviewed by the City Transportation Engineering Section. As of about an hour ago, it was just received, so that slide needs to be updated. Some ongoing discussions include designing the intersection of Beulah and Purple Sage at grades that will support a future I-17 underpass. This underpass was in the last version of the regional plan and was recently confirmed by MetroPlan to be included in the next version of the regional plan as well. Similarly, the grades at the hospital main entrance driveway and Beulah shall be designed to accommodate a future signalized intersection. The goal is to have these few topics agreed upon before going to council in April. That's all I have.
So widening Beulah to 4 lanes, I'm just looking at the numbers. Currently, I think you said there was about 3,600 trips on Beulah. Is that correct? 3,800. So approximately, what am I trying to think of? 800 divided by 2. 1,700 trips each way, let's just say. But if you widen it to 4 lanes, and we're expecting 15,000, that's still going to be really congested compared to the 3,800 trips we currently have for 2 lanes. Does that make sense? Just seems like it'll be not enough.
Just to give another perspective, Milton Road is approximately 35,000. So that's also a 2-lane roadway. And there is congestion there as well. But I believe a 2-lane roadway holds, Jeff, approximately? What? Okay. Okay. About 35,000 is for a 4-lane roadway.
So you would see it being congested certain times a day.
It's very possible for full build-out, I would imagine. And these numbers are just approximations, they're calculations done. We do plan to come through and study, once phase 1 is in, what the traffic actually did, and we can compare the numbers that we calculated to what's going on out in the field.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yap?
Okay, so if we can go back to the map that showed how many intersections would need to be addressed. And again, I'm gonna ask the, the proverbial question, who's gonna pay for all of this? And I think the last time that I was aware of the cost of even just a traffic light was about $100,000. So I'm sure in the last 5 years that has increased. So again, I think it'd be really interesting to get a full understanding of, and I understand that some of this is going to come from the development agreement, right? So in essence, we're looking at all of this, but we don't know who's going to pay for what. So I think that when we do get the development agreement, I would like to see a full listing of it's going to cost this much for, you know, the fire department's going to cost this much for infrastructure, it's going to cost this much, this is how much, the hospital's going to put in, as far as, and we need to account for impact fees and all of that other good stuff. But then we also need to look at future revenue to get to a bottom line return on investment, right? So how much is that going to impact us as citizens in Flag, and are taxes going to rise, all of that good stuff. So I know you can't answer that right now, but I'm just putting these things on the table.
Definitely. Yeah.
I was wondering, at our last public hearing, when we were talking about moving the activity center and all of that, and we talked a little bit about Beulah and the expansion to 4 lanes. At the time, it was not going to be 4 lanes at that point. I think they were still trying to figure that out because their responsibility was only on the site, et cetera. So I was wondering if you could give a little backstory from our last public hearing to now, where now we are getting to the point of having 4 lanes on Beulah from Woodlands to J.W. Powell, and who's paid for that, or who's committed to paying for that?
Sure, I may have miscommunicated. It's always actually been anticipated that Beulah would be a 4-lane road as part of this project.
Great, okay, and my second question is, when we're talking traffic and talking traffic on Beulah, how does this affect emergency services, ambulances getting to the hospital when there's potentially traffic on that limited access point?
Sure, and NIH is probably going to be the best to answer that question in terms of ambulances and how they would operate. I mean, of course, an ambulance and a siren, we're all trained to pull off and allow the ambulance to move through. NIH also operates Guardian Medical, so they could probably answer that. And I'm sure they're analyzing that to make sure that they'll be able to meet those times as necessary.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear that later, especially when there's the county fair going on and when that is typically backed up on top of just regular traffic going to the hospital. So,
Sure.
thank you.
And if I could get into the cost a little bit, I mean, we're not going to probably be able to provide you, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the numbers you're looking for. We'll definitely have the development agreement ready for council. And we can't move forward to council without that, but we may not have all of those numbers. I will do my best to update you on April 12th with what that looks like. We won't actually know what the full cost of the improvements would be on Beulah until we actually get into the civil plan review and start to get the construction estimates. But we can tell you that the city has partnered with NIH for a RAISE grant. So we are pursuing federal transportation dollars to have this project funded. And the city is working with NIH on that request. I believe that grant is upwards of, do we know, 45 to $49 million is what we're talking about. And those are just specifically these improvements that you see on the screen now. I doubt that cost could change, right? We all know by the time we actually see construction start, but that funding source may be fluid and fluctuating throughout. We won't know the results of that RAISE grant until June 28th. And they would like to get this before council before that happens. I think the point is that we need to be fluid in how those elements are paid for, but understanding that they are required to occur in order for the development to be supported.
Just as another question, if this, let's just say there was space in town and the hospital decided to plop this hospital right in the center of town, would the same traffic impact, would the traffic impacts be the same just for another area of town?
You can assume that the hospital stays where it's at and it expands. What we're doing here is we're taking the hospital from a downtown location and we're putting it in a rural area that is very undeveloped. That 2-lane highway, there's not even a good shoulder there. It's kind of sketchy to even drive on that road, in my opinion. So would the traffic analysis mitigation be the same? No, I would assume it'd be much, much different. I would assume less because we already have a lot of the infrastructure in the downtown area.
Did the TIA offer any percentages of traffic flow from different orientations off of I-40, west, east, 17, through town on Beulah? I assume those numbers didn't correspond to just the traffic on Beulah. Was it overall?
Yeah, so those trips that you saw on that slide, the 27,000 and the 2025 or whatever it was, those trips were then distributed throughout town. They were distributed all the way over to Country Club, all the way over to, the other TI, Flagstaff Ranch, all the way down south. Some of them went to Phoenix. So they were distributed throughout town, and that's why we looked at those other intersections. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I was wondering, did you look at what percentage, say, would be coming in from the rear through Woody Mountain and coming up 89A from Sedona or off of 17? Was there a breakdown of that?
Yeah, there's a map within the TIA that shows the distribution. We can provide that next. We can definitely throw that up there next time. All right, are we ready? Move on to the next topic? All right. A water sewer impact analysis was also completed.
In terms of water, there is a substantial off-site improvement that is required, and that is an extension of a 16-inch water main that needs to be extended through the project site. It's coming from the sort of southwest, from Fort Tuthill. It'll go through the project site, run through Beulah, and connect up to University Heights. That is the off-site improvement. Of course, that will happen in conjunction with the improvements to Beulah Boulevard. Water lines to the site will need to be connected off of that larger 16-inch main to serve the development within the Health Village itself. And the applicant is also required to construct a water storage tank associated with the water lines to connect it to the Zone B system. It's a 685,000 gallon tank, and it has to be placed at an elevation to provide adequate pressure. The city is currently working, and also has additional needs, and is currently working on a location, and we're going through that process with the Forest Service. So we're looking at that potential site and getting the entitlements for that site at this point in time. We might also be working with NAH to enlarge the size of that tank. So we do like to be proactive, especially if we know that additional development is coming into the area. In terms of wastewater, the property is served with an 18-inch sewer line. There was a recent extension completed for Fort Tuthill. So Coconino County did go through that process of extending that water line, and they have elected to go through the reimbursement process. So NAH will be responsible to reimburse Coconino County their proportionate share of that sewer line. In terms of stormwater, it's the same story that you generally hear, which is they chose not to look at off-site, sort of the downstream analysis, which can be rather huge. Instead, they're looking at the difference between pre-development and post-development, and they'll do a series of retention and detention on site in order to manage stormwater. Those details, it's very high level at this point, because looking at the entitlements, we're not in the construction drawings and documents at this point.
So in relation to the stormwater, was it looked at with the parking field versus a secondary parking structure as far as water runoff and how that might be different?
So it didn't take into account, I mean, the current drainage did not take into account a secondary parking structure that would be far off in the future. But if impervious replaces impervious, it's not too dramatic of a change, is what I'm saying, is if an area is already, even if it's just surface and you then put a building on it, if you already have pavement over it, it's included in that calculation as already being an impervious surface.
I guess what I mean is the parking field, if that could be converted to a parking structure and not have 100,000 square feet of horizontal parking, but it's divided up into 5 stories vertical, wouldn't that in theory reduce the amount of
Yes.
water? Yeah.
Absolutely, it would
Okay.
reduce the amount of impervious surface on the site if they were to take away the surface parking and put it all in structured. So this takes us, we'll go through the zoning map amendment findings. The specific plan doesn't have the same sort of listed out findings. It's about being in conformance with the regional plan. That regional plan conformance is stretched over both of your staff summaries. There's a much more general analysis done as part of the specific plan report. There's more of a detailed goals and policies analysis within your rezoning report. It is a particular finding for the rezoning that the rezoning needs to be in conformance with the regional plan or the general plan. Our regional plan is our general plan. And so if, So the proposal would be in conformance. The concept zoning map amendment request attempts to address or mitigate impacts of the majority of the goals and policies in the regional plan. There is some uncertainty about the proposals pertaining to transit, pertaining to transportation demand, and to public safety that need further resolution to be in fully conformance with the regional plan, goals and policies. Staff has paid attention to these concerns in negotiating the development agreement as well as crafting the proposed conditions of approval. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of adding those conditions of approval. This presentation's already been very long, so I didn't go through that very in-depth detailed analysis of all of the goals and policies. I'm happy to bring that back on April 12th if you would like me to do that. And then I'm going to jump to finding number 2, and that's the proposed amendment must be determined not to be detrimental to the public interest, health, safety, convenience, or welfare. And staff believes that the project will not be detrimental so long as it is developed in accordance with the provisions discussed in these reports. The applicant has identified the following community benefits: that the existing hospital cannot adequately serve the community's needs in the future years. A new hospital expands capacity to meet those needs and to implement best practices in patient care. It helps them retain top talent within the medical field, as well as the preservation of open space for the benefit of patients and for the use of the community. Staff identifies the community benefit of this project to include contributions to the improvement of the overall transportation system, improvements to the existing water system that will support the greater area, not just the proposed development. Staff believes that the project intends to contribute to the community by exceeding the basic requirements of the zoning code and providing resources that will support the greater community as well as mitigate impacts of the proposed development.
Excuse me, Tiffany.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Oops.
I appreciate that that section about the goals and policies is long, but in a way that's our most important
I will
finding.
go. How
So
about-
if there's some way to do that,
Yep.
I think it'd be really important.
Do you want me to go through it now, or do you want to go through it on the 12th?
Maybe on the 12th.
Okay. I will focus most of the presentation. So I think we could take this one as sort of walking you through the meat and bones of what the application and the development proposal really is. And I can really hit the findings this next time around for you, if that works. And I can do it overall as a whole, because I think for all of the findings, it matters with those goals and policy analysis. So I'll do a much more in-depth detailed. Also, Sarah has agreed to come in on person on the 12th and be of assistance.
That's great. Thank you.
So I'm going to skip the findings for now and just talk to you about what the draft development agreement contents include. It includes provisions for offsite water infrastructure improvements, water storage requirements, sewer reimbursement, onsite and offsite transportation improvements, fire department requirements, and future affordable housing contributions. So the applicant has included provisions for their future development in terms of what they're willing to do in terms of affordable housing. The citizen participation plan. So the specific plan does require an additional step than traditional rezoning cases. This did have to go out for a 60-day review. That 60-day review is to specific entities within the community. That happened on June 3rd of last year, and staff received formal comments from Coconino County, FUSD, and Friends of Flagstaff's Future. Those comments were attached to your staff report in regards to the 60-day review. The applicant also held 3 neighborhood meetings for this application in addition to a proposed specific plan and zoning map amendment. They were held January 6th and 18th and October 10th of last year. All of those meetings were held virtually. The January 6th meeting had approximately 70 attendees. January 18th had 100. In October, they had 154. Common themes of support included economic development impacts, better access to care and new clinical services, and the themes of and overall health and wellness vision. Common themes of concern included transit and bus service, access to the new campus, traffic, reuse of the existing NIH campus, helicopter, ambulance noise, and building height. Staff has also received 39 written comments as of the writing of the report. And I have, during today, I think we've forwarded on a couple. I'm sure if I check my phone, there's more. I'll regroup those that weren't attached to the staff report and reattach them for you for the April 12th hearing.
Tiffany, can I back up to on the development agreement?
Yes.
You do talk about transportation improvements. Is public transportation at all an item on the development agreement?
I'll get to the condition of of what's been proposed by NIH in terms of transit. So I think the conditions will sort of help, but staff is recommending approval. And there are several conditions for the specific plan and then as well as for the rezoning. The subject property be developed in substantial conformance. A high-quality public amenity that serves as an active recreation feature shall be provided within the wellness retreat as determined by the PROS Division Director. The specific plan shall be revised to include all transportation improvements as required by the approved traffic impact analysis and any conditions of approval. The access points for Phase 2 need to be revised. Image 17 needs to include curb and gutter. These are really small details. We were pressed for time, so there are just some small details that need to be changed within the specific plan, so my best option was to include them here as conditions. The specific plan shall be revised to reflect all required and improved engineering modifications. And image 33 on the infrastructure phasing plan needs to be updated as well. And the existing aggregate trail from the point north to Lake Mary Road will be paved to facilitate year-round travel. The phasing plan, there was a number of just small details. I won't read all of these to you, but they're just small little things that need to be changed, clarifications, all references to paved foots. I even heard Martin just say paved. The code requires concrete. We don't allow you to use asphalt pavement. So just so there's never any arguments, I've learned over all of this time that words matter. So just little tiny things that need to be corrected. A final specific plan shall be provided to the city on both paper and digital format with all of these changes made. And then all other requirements of the zoning code apply, and all terms and conditions of the development agreement need to also apply. So let's jump to the concept zoning map amendment, which has the meat in it. And that is that the subject property be developed in substantial conformance with the planning documents. All on-site and off-site transportation improvements as identified in the approved TIA shall be completed prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy on the property. Assurances shall be provided prior to the issuance of any building permits. So assurances is they're providing us some form of way to take care of it ourselves should they fail to provide that infrastructure. The intersection of Beulah Boulevard and Purple Sage Trail shall be designed and constructed to allow for the future underpass across I-17. Final design shall be approved by the city engineer. All intersections shall be designed and constructed as protected intersections for enhanced bicycle and pedestrian safety as feasible, subject to city engineer's approval. A fully staffed ladder company shall be relocated to Fire Station Number 6 per the approval of the fire department. If Fire Station Number 6 is not able to accommodate the new equipment and staff, a new fire station shall be provided within the immediate vicinity of the existing station. The Cosmic Ray Tunnel at Sheeps Hill Trail Crossing shall be redesigned, reconstructed to work with the Beulah Boulevard improvements that include widening the road. NAH shall provide at a minimum 20-minute shuttle service daily from the property to the nearest transit stop. The shuttle service shall be open to the public, including employees, and shall not require additional fares. And this would remain in place until such time as an agreement can be reached with Mountain Line for final transit service. But to date, there is not an agreement with Mountain Line for transit service. Foundation landscaping may be located further than 25 feet from the building to comply with Firewise landscaping requirements. To mitigate the proposed building placement, a 60-foot front landscape buffer from Beulah Boulevard shall be provided with the intent of preserving as many mature ponderosa trees as possible. All other requirements of the zoning code shall be met. All terms and conditions of the development agreement should be fully satisfied, and if the property is rezoned and they fail to move forward with the development, we can always come back and pursue rezoning it back to its original rezoning. That's sort of a catch-all on all rezoning cases. And with that, now if you have questions on any of those items, I'd be happy to.
Commissioner?
So can you expand on the Mountain Line transit issue and why wouldn't that agreement be part of this as opposed to just offering this temporary shuttle service?
I think that NIH can answer that question better than I can. Staff has always felt that the hospital being served by transit was an important feature. I believe it simply comes down to cost.
And my second question is, at our last public hearing, there was a lot of discussion about the existing sites owned by NIH and what would happen to them and how they would be handled. And of course, I realize it's not part of the rezoning nor the specific plan for this, but where is that falling currently?
Yeah, there are conversations occurring about, and I believe a consultant has been hired to work through what potentially could happen with the existing hospital site. I think the other important thing to recognize too is that we are in the process of updating our regional plan as well. And the hospital is looking at a timeframe of opening in 2027. So there's a lot of community planning going on and a lot of great opportunities to work through what will happen with the existing hospital site. It hasn't been my focus. I've clearly spent all my time on the new hospital site, but I know that it is a community concern. What I can assure you is that the existing hospital site is zoned high-density residential. The hospital itself operates under a conditional use permit, so it is fairly limited in terms of redevelopment under existing entitlements. It's most likely going to need to move forward with a true redevelopment plan with a need for additional entitlements, and then you would be seeing it then. But I think there's a lot of work in the process, and again, I think NIH can probably address it much better than I can, but it's definitely a consideration. There are some provisions in the draft development agreement to date in that regard. I think the only thing that's really hard is that so many things change from now till then. And what we might say today is what we want, we might feel differently about in 2027 as well. So there is definitely some time to, I think, vet this through the community and spend the time that it takes to take this really community resource that's right in the middle of, basically the middle of Flagstaff and its downtown, and figure out the right, best appropriate use for it.
And my only other comment was just about the development agreement, and I may be getting ahead of myself a little bit because I would imagine that we'll have a lot of public comment tonight. And I understand that a development agreement is something that's out of our purview. It's between staff and council and such. But this public hearing and these entitlements are our last chance to see it and for the public to have any input. And this is such a massive and unique situation. You know, I think I personally would feel more comfortable in having more details about a development agreement so that there's some comfort among everyone as it moves forward.
And I'm gonna do my best to have that information for you on April 12th. You know, essentially, as we've been going through this negotiation, we've had 2 executive sessions with City Council to date. We have our direction. We need to convey that to the applicant before we can really move forward. And last week was spring break, time fell apart, wasn't able to have that conversation. It's gonna happen here real shortly, and we should have much more definitive information on that development agreement when we come back to you on April 12th.
So excuse this question if it's dumb, I guess. But as a new member of the P&Z, I guess to follow up on your comment, I want to understand procedurally, right? So if, let's just say hypothetically that we approve this zoning change, it still needs to go to City Council. It still needs to be approved via City Council. So I guess in essence, if you could just kind of walk through, what are the next, what are we looking at here so that we understand?
With this particular case, we are required to have 2 public hearings on the rezoning because of this, and the specific plan. So normally you wouldn't have 2 public hearings on rezoning. Sometimes you will based on the size, but most smaller ones, you're only gonna have 1. In this case, we'll have 2. From Planning and Zoning Commission, you will make a formal recommendation to council on the way they should vote.
And I will do my best to take down all of your thoughts and feelings on how you make your decision and the why, so that I convey that to City Council. I can see that City Council's interested, though, in this particular hearing tonight. So, you know, I think they probably want to hear it for themselves. Generally, City Council will watch Planning and Zoning Commission, even if they're not present and participating at the time. They do care very much about where the commission comes from, what their concerns are, and how that moves forward. Council will make that final decision. It does go to council twice because there's an ordinance involved on both the rezoning and the specific plan. Those ordinances have 2 reads. We have not yet scheduled the city council dates, right? Because we need to have all of those documents formalized. So we need to have the TIA completed. I'm hoping that it's just a stitch here and a hook there, and we're done with that document. I'm even hoping by April 12th, we'll be forward with you with an approved TIA. So there are just some last wrap-up documents. We don't even know what the dates of council will be at this point. I know that the applicant is hoping to catch on to council April 18th and then May 2nd for their first and second reads, but we still have to get these last little bits. I mean, today I woke up and I was just energetic that we're almost there. We're almost there.
I have a follow-up question on that. I just want to make it really, really clear that what we are deciding on to recommend tonight is the entire concept zoning map amendment, but only the one portion of the rezoning.
The entire specific plan.
Oh, the entire specific plan.
But the specific plan is written to only include the Phase 1 development standards that we went over today, which are specific to the rezoning parcels.
Okay.
When we come back to rezone the Phase 2, there will be a Phase 2 specific plan with that that will then include the specific development standards for those parcels as well. But it sets more of the planning framework. You get the planning framework for the whole Health Village, because it doesn't make sense for you to make this decision in an abstract without seeing what the larger picture is going to be and what you're going to be asked to approve. And really, it's us working through that next phase of the TIA to get to that second phase of development.
Oh, go for it.
One more question about the financial side of things. Who's doing the math to figure out if the city can afford to support this facility?
Oh, sure. We have a fantastic, amazing support team. I have spent so much time with our finance division. I mean, I think everybody has had their hands in working through the numbers, figuring out what can be accommodated by the city, how that all works out. So, you know, we've looked at a lot of different details in terms of finance. If you want me to invite them to the next meeting, I can do that, and they can try to assist me in sort of explaining how we work through those details. Funding fluctuates, you know, for us every year in the budget process, and there's lots of ways we go through that budgeting process. There's also the potential to obtain grants for additional funding, and that's something we're looking at more and more for a lot of things with NAH. For example, one of the details I haven't gone into in terms of the firefighters is, you know, we're pretty confident, we feel pretty good. I mean, nothing is ever guaranteed, but we feel pretty good that we can get a grant to cover the cost of those firefighters for the first 3 years. So a lot of those things really help us sort of accommodate that time and the benefits financially that the city would also receive from the construction of this project.
Well, I don't see any more questions right now, but I want to thank you very much for your enduring work on this. It's a really long-term project and the biggest one I've seen. So thank you very much for your work.
I really want to thank you for listening to me for that extended period of time. So, thank you.
Made it interesting. I have a question. Would any of the commissioners like to take a 5-minute break? Okay. Me too, thank you. So just 5 minutes, we won't keep up very long, because got a lot of people waiting. So I'd like to go ahead, and I think the next thing on our agenda, on this item here, is for the applicant to make a presentation for NAH. Okay, take your time.
It's not Tiffany's fault, it's not.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chair Jones and Commissioners. My name is Josh Tinkle. I'm the Acting Chief Executive Officer for Northern Arizona Healthcare, and thank you for taking time this evening to hear our case, and thank you for everyone who's in attendance and is really looking forward to hearing about this project. I want to take just the first second to thank Tiffany and the city team and the amount of work that has been accomplished on this particular project. In and of itself, as you guys mentioned, is probably the largest project that many have ever seen, and that does not go unnoticed by us. So thank you, Tiffany, and your team. So I'm going to kick off a little bit to tell you a little about Northern Arizona Healthcare. So I'll have Chris go to the first slide. And for those of you who are not aware, for more than 50 years, Northern Arizona Healthcare has provided care to this community. We have about 3,000 employees across our system, and all of our revenue that we take, as someone mentioned earlier, we're a tax exempt or not-for-profit organization, so we take all of those proceeds and we reinvest in our staff, our infrastructure, and services for the community in which we service. We also take care of any patient, regardless of their ability to pay. And we're very fortunate here in Northern Arizona to operate the only level 1 trauma center in Northern Arizona. I like to give a little fun fact. There's 13 level 1 trauma centers in the state of Arizona. 11 of them are in Maricopa County. So there's one in Tucson, and we happen to have one here, and that's really the highest level of care that you can have within an organization. Next slide, Chris. So how do we service the community? About 25% of the patients that we take care of at Flagstaff Medical Center are considered financially disadvantaged. We serve a region, and you'll see it here in a couple slides, of about 50,000 square miles. We are the sole community healthcare provider in many of the communities that we service, and about a third of our patients at any given time at Flagstaff Medical Center come from tribal nations. As we talked about earlier, you heard about 60% of our population at any given time that's coming to Flagstaff Medical Center are coming from outside our community. In fiscal year of 2021, just for example, Northern Arizona Healthcare provided about $125 million in care for patients that would otherwise not be able to afford that care. So just a testament to our commitment to the community. As I said, we service Northern Arizona. This really is our region that we service. There are a couple hospitals scattered throughout that region, but we are the tertiary backstop for all of those facilities to send their patients to us. So as we walk through tonight, Steve will talk and go through a lot of stuff that Tiffany went through, but really we are here to continue to further the high level of care that Flagstaff Medical Center has provided to the community for many years. We hope to continue to do that for many, many more years to come. Our proposed goals of the Health and Wellness Village is, one, to build a state-of-the-art facility that meets the advancing technologies in healthcare. We want to be able to continue to create an environment where we can continue to recruit industry-leading providers. I think we have some of those in the crowd tonight. Increase access to care, and then break down the operational barriers that sometimes limit us from providing that care in a high-value, efficient manner. So with that, I'll hand it over to Steve, who will walk us through the application.
Thanks, Josh, and thank you, Commissioners, and also Chair Jones. I'm Steve Ice. I'm NAH's Vice President of Construction and Real Estate Development. I joined the company in February of 2021. To do a few things, but most importantly to bring this project to the community of Northern Arizona. So a few things that I want to just touch on. You're going to see a little bit of overlap in some of our slides from what Tiffany presented earlier. We're going to try and skim through some of those things that we think were adequately covered by Tiffany, because we know there's going to be some robust public participation process. But just as a reminder for what we're here to talk about tonight, in that phase one, we're really talking about this 55-acre development in the center of the land NAH owns. And that really is comprised of three main pieces. It's the new 274-bed inpatient replacement hospital for Flagstaff Medical Center. It does have future capacity to grow. We'll talk about that a little bit down in the presentation, but it's intended to open with 274 beds. A ambulatory care center, which I've heard the term used multiple times tonight. I don't know if all of you on the commission understand what an ambulatory care center is, but in a nutshell, it is a very large integrated outpatient doctor's offices. So think primary care physicians, specialty care physicians, outpatient labs, imaging, outpatient surgery, et cetera, all in a one-stop shop, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail also. And then the employee parking garage, along with the parking field, just to clarify some of the comments that were made earlier about parking in general. It isn't that we disagree with the City of Flagstaff's idea of parking. This happens very frequently in large-scale healthcare development. We get classified as institutional, and institutional doesn't necessarily cover inpatient health care. So we have done our own parking analysis that's really based off of more national standards. There's kind of 6 national standards that are typically used depending on location and depending on acuity. We have used a kind of an aggregate of the 2 that are on the more moderate side. We understand the concept of minimizing the parking to promote multimodal traffic. So this was done. So just to give you a quick, we have about the institutional parking component would say we need about 1,100 parking spots. A normal outpatient healthcare facility is parked at 5 per 1,000. So just our ACC in that metric would need 900 of those 1,100 parking spots, which would leave about 200 parking spots for a 274-bed inpatient facility. So you can kind of see the disconnect there. So it's pretty common when building hospitals that we use our own kind of park to suit for us. I can assure you we are not intending to overpark the facility. It would not be in our financial interest to overpark the facility. Next, just a little bit of background on why we're moving and why we think this is so important for the community and the region. The current Flagstaff Medical Center, as it stands right now, I think this image sums it up really well, bisected by a major street in the north-south direction, surrounded by major streets in all other directions, and it has become increasingly more difficult over time to continue to grow and expand on campus. We did vet out at the very early onset of this project what a complete redevelopment of the existing campus looks like. We don't have adequate parking, we don't have adequate acreage, we don't have adequate traffic infrastructure. We're already currently a part of the burden of downtown traffic. And so we did analyze that, and what the result of it was, in a quick, concise message, was 15 to 20 years worth of development. That would involve us having to shut down parts of the hospital, parts of the parking, and parts of the traffic through that 15 to 20 years, which would just further impact what you'll see is already an impact to our community and how many patients we defer because we don't have enough patients or enough beds to serve our community as is. So we feel that a new campus is warranted. We feel that that new campus will be able to continue to support not only the growth we've seen in the last years in the region of Northern Arizona, but to continue to see growth into the future. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too, to talk about how we're really trying to look at this as a true 50-year plan. But you can see this bottom bullet point, which I think is the most important bullet point on this slide. In the past year, NIH has deferred 5,600 patients out of the community. Most of those patients wind up in either Phoenix or Vegas. The majority of those deferrals were not based off of acuity, and what I mean by that is they were not patients that we couldn't take care of at NIH because we didn't have the facilities or services. These are patients we had to defer because we didn't have the room for them, and they had to be sent out of our community. And as you can see, 55% of those patients were from facilities serving tribal nations. Yeah, feel free to ask questions during.
Just curiosity-wise, how was that impacted by COVID? Because that, not at all? You're shaking your head, but I'm thinking that
because
COVID
we
had to
yeah,
impact that.
and I'm shaking my head because we continue to see this rate of deferrals now, and we have a very low rate of COVID patients in our facilities. And we have done our own projections of not only past data, but what we intend to see for future data, and we don't believe the minimalization of COVID will impact these numbers at all. Next slide, please, Chris. Another one of the benefits we feel the new campus affords us is really this seamless patient experience. Healthcare is moving as much as possible into a true outpatient setting. We're trying, our patients, our insurance providers, and our practitioners are kind of pushing us towards moving whatever we can into an outpatient setting that is currently done in an inpatient setting. Part of being able to do that in an efficient manner and a cost-effective manner, and when I say cost-effective, I don't only mean cost-effective for NIH, but I mean cost-effective for our patients, is to create this seamless patient experience. The ambulatory care center and the physical connection between the ambulatory care center and our inpatient hospital helps provide that seamless integration of healthcare. So you can see some of the items on the left. Some of these items that we don't even currently provide or aren't currently provided to our community. Hyperbaric and wound is one of the things that we don't currently have in the Flagstaff and Northern Arizona region. This was actually something that we were granted congressional earmark dollars to provide for the community. We don't currently provide an infusion center as part of a true integrated oncology center. And we also don't provide outpatient GI and endoscopy. You can see some of the other things in the middle that are considered to be limited integration in our case. We do have medical office buildings on campus, some of them physically connected, some of them not. We do have a surgery center in proximity to our campus, but not one directly connected to our campus right now. The same for imaging and office-based labs. So we're trying to take some of these services and co-locate them into a true integrated experience for our patients. So our plan for the next 50 years, I think what you'll see when we get into true construction documents and building is a very well thought out plan that not only responds to the needs of the community as it is right now, as I had said earlier, an opening of 274 beds, which is a 34-bed increase from what we currently provide to the community right now, but it's a well thought out growth plan as the region of Northern Arizona continues to grow. So we've systematically designed the building to know how inpatient can grow, how outpatient can grow, and maybe more importantly, how the support network with the hospital can grow, everything from food services to supply chain services, labs, pharmacy, and some of those support networks for our inpatient care. We were excited to bring some of the more latest and greatest technologies to the community that we currently don't have. We were lucky enough to bring a brand new hybrid OR to the community just last year, but right now we are out of room and infrastructure to continue to upgrade some of the technology for some of the emerging technologies to bring newer clinical care to the region. The location itself on the I-17 and 40, I know there's been a lot of discussion tonight about traffic and access, but for a regional medical center, which is what we are, serving an area of 50,000 square miles, this location off the I-17 and I-40 is a much better location from a regional standpoint to be able to be reached by our customers. And then our 22-acre natural retreat integrated with the Foots, Tiffany had touched on this during her presentation, but we think that's a unique element that we're bringing to the community and to our patients and staff. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about just expanding care for our patients. Not sure if everyone on the commission knows this, but right now, the existing Flagstaff Medical Center, on top of not having enough beds to serve the community, we currently operate 66 of our beds in a double occupancy, which means 66 of our beds have roommates. It is very uncommon in modern healthcare to see double occupancy rooms. We will be moving to a fully single room facility at our new campus. So that's 274 private rooms, private spaces in our emergency department, private observation. Not only that, but all of our rooms will be upgraded in size and technology to meet all the codes and needs of the Arizona Department of Health Services. In addition to that, increased access to clinical options such as comprehensive oncology services. Part of our ambulatory care center is a true integrated oncology center that provides not only clinic services for oncology patients, but radiation oncology and infusion services for our patients. An expanded emergency department with faster service. I'm sure there's some of you at this dais and potentially in the room that have experienced our emergency department. It is one of the sources of complaints for us. I think our staff does an excellent job of managing it as it is, but the reality is our emergency department is too small. Our waiting area is too small, and more importantly, when you look at the overall flow of an emergency department, most of the reason emergency departments back up is because we don't have a place to put patients when they need to be put into an inpatient setting after their ED visit is over. So expanding not only the capabilities of the inpatient portion of our facility, but also expanding the ED itself will help our throughput for the community. And then we are working to design to better accommodate healing practices of tribal nations, strengthening NIH's existing resources for tribal members. Next. From a community benefit perspective, I think we talked quite a bit at our last hearing about how our amendment to the regional plan bolstered Flagstaff's goals, and I think we showed that alignment. In addition to Flagstaff's regional plan goals, we also feel that we can bring a lot more clinical partnerships with our provider networks, along with the research and development facilities that we could potentially build in that research and innovation corridor on the south end of our land. We're already in high-level discussions with both NAU and CCC about bolstering our training partnerships for future healthcare professionals. There is, as I'm sure you're aware, of a shortage of healthcare professionals across the country, and especially in the state of Arizona. And we also wanted to increase economic development capabilities for the business community, as well as be able to recruit and retain the best clinicians. We get a lot of questions about how we intend to staff the new facility with some of the staffing challenges that we have at our existing facilities. from a context perspective, the staffing challenges that we have are not really any different than the staffing challenges that the entire healthcare community across the country is having post-pandemic. But we feel the new facility actually will benefit us. We do think we can use it as a recruitment tool. We do think we can use it as a retention tool. And more importantly, we feel we can get a lot of operational efficiencies out of a much more well-designed building than what we currently have. So as an example of that, the third floor of our existing hospital is 900 feet from one side to the other. So that's 3 football fields from one side to the other that we're currently pushing patients, pushing trash, pushing supplies. We have nursing units that don't match our staffing ratios. So if we have a 4-to-1 staffing ratio from beds to nurse, we have units that are 13 beds. So we have to staff that with 4 nurses for 13, as opposed to a better design unit that would get us 4 nurses seeing the 16 patients that they're supposed to see. Next. I have a couple of pretty much the same images from viewshed analysis. Does anyone want to see them, or does anyone have any questions about how we put together the viewshed analysis? Okay. So Josh, there he is. Yeah.
So we're obviously here tonight to talk about the medical campus and the ACC, as we've talked about too. But also important, one of the reasons that we were really wanting to do a whole health and wellness village is really moving away from sick care to well care. And one of the key indicators for that is social determinants of health, and we have some experts in the room on that tonight if you'd like to speak with it. But the whole concept of the entire village is the hospital and the ambulatory care center are anchor tenants for the need when you will get sick. But the remaining part of the village that we want to build is one that promotes healthy wellness living integrated into our trail systems, healthy offerings for grocers, food, et cetera. Because we believe in order to be where healthcare is moving in the future is that we need to get into more value-based care where we're helping people be well and not always taking care of them when they're sick. So next slide. And that really aligns with how we've structured the overall health and wellness village. So you really see all of those components of the determinants of health aligned here in our health and wellness village. You can see from the top, neighborhood and community is extremely important. Social settings and social contexts, obviously healthcare research and healthcare delivery is extremely important. Restaurants, education partnerships, and all of that, and really tying all of that together. That's certainly a future state for us. What the most pressing need right now for the community in Northern Arizona healthcare is what we're talking about tonight, which is the acute care facility as well as the ambulatory campus.
Thank you. So just a little bit about our alignment with Flagstaff's Regional Plan 2030, and we did touch on some of these items when we did our minor regional plan amendment, but we feel we are balancing housing and employment with preservation. So when we think about things like multimodality, when we even think about things like the big shift to us isn't just a road network, it's being able to have people live, work, shop, eat in one location to reduce some of those vehicle miles. Increasing the variety of housing options and expand employment opportunities. So we do intend on bringing at minimum 325 housing units to our new development and are hoping to be an economic development engine for new growth and new companies to come into our community to add to our job needs. Developing well-designed activity centers. So Tiffany touched on our 22-acre Foots area, which will also be open to the public. We are working with the Parks Department to have those active fitness centers along the trail. From an economic development perspective, support job training programs at all levels. So as I said earlier, plan on working with NAU and Coconino Community College to continue job growth and job development throughout the community. Promoting economic viability through investments in existing and new activity centers. So you remember we took our, what was Suburban Regional Center and moved it into Regional Activity Center to continue to kind of expand on that growth. And then neighborhoods, housing, and urban conservation, foster healthy and diverse neighborhoods. Again, that live, work, play concept, make available a variety of housing. and provide housing opportunities for all economic sectors. So one of the things you will see is our commitment to a certain percentage of housing units being affordable housing when our development agreement is finalized here in the next couple of weeks. I won't go through all these numbers. These are some of the numbers that Tiffany touched on in her presentation. I do think it's important, and I appreciate Commissioner Camp and then Commissioner Norton kind of adding in after that, that the economics of this project are obviously very important. They're very important for us. They're very important for the city. Appreciated you, Commissioner Camp, for kind of talking about the money on both sides of the ledger. We hear a lot about what monies are going to be needed to support developments like this, but I think it's very important as we look at that to counterbalance those discussions with the economic development impact, the impact fee, and the tax base that we feel we already bring into the community and we will continue to grow into the community. And just a little bit about our collaborating. We have been working on this for over 2 years. I think we submitted our application initially in the second or third week of April of 2021. There were teams of people working on this all the way into early 2020. Some of those partnerships we've fostered. We worked with Greater Flagstaff Forestry Partnership, so it was mentioned earlier about our tree thinning project. That was a project that was brought to us by Greater Flagstaff Forestry Partnership. We did team up with them to go get grant money to do that healthy forestry initiative. NIH did put up the match money for that. As the chief said earlier, we did work with Facets Consulting, which is who the city was already working with to do their standards of coverage analysis. NIH did provide an appendix to that at cost to NIH to make sure that we were covering our bases and understood exactly what the implications from a fire safety perspective were. We are currently working in a great collaborative partnership with the city of Flagstaff and submitted an application for a RAISE grant for the road network, specifically that widening of Beulah. That was submitted, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we're hoping to find out on June 28th. But I think it's a really great testament to the collaboration between NIH and the city of Flagstaff, where our staff and their staff got together to try and make things happen for the community. And a question was asked earlier about the redevelopment of the existing campus. I think Tiffany provided a very good answer. It is quite far out. She referenced that if things go according to plan, we won't be relocating the hospital till 2027. Knowing that there's a redevelopment project on the back end of that at the existing campus, we're probably looking at more like a 2029, 2030 redevelopment of the existing campus. It is very hard to look 7, 8 years out and understand exactly what the needs and right thing to do for the community is. So what we have done and what you'll see from a commitment perspective in the development agreement when it gets executed, we are retaining the services of Puma. Puma is an urban management company that the city of Flagstaff and the Downtown Business Alliance had already been working on to do kind of a reimagination of what downtown Flagstaff can look like and what the growth of downtown Flagstaff could look like. We are adding on to that. It will be a separate engagement with Puma, but we are retaining their services to lead us through a community-focused and community-based needs assessment of what that redevelopment should look like. We do have a community-based advisory council that will be working on that, and we will have kind of certain checkpoints and certain commitments that we're willing to make in that development agreement that you'll see in a few weeks to make sure that we provide something at the existing campus that is of community need and community benefit, but also has the goals of being a long-standing development in such an important location within the city.
So I'll just finish up with a couple final slides, and then we'll be happy to take any comments or questions. We've done a lot of community participation and participation across the region, state, and even federally to try to help get this project along. And with that has came a lot of advocacy and support, and some of those are listed here. American Medical Association, the Arizona Medical Association, Arizona Osteopathic Medical Association, Arizona Nursing Association, Senator Sinema, et cetera. And I hope what you'll hear tonight from public comment is, I think we all agree that we want to have outstanding, high-quality care here in our community for many, many years to come. And we believe that this is the way to accomplish that. So if you go to the next slide, Chris. So our ask is really on the future of Flagstaff to support the recommendation that will make it possible to deliver that high-quality healthcare here for many years, probably beyond any of us in this room will be here to see that occur. But our formal ask is for planning and zoning to forward this to the city of Flagstaff City Council with a recommendation for approving. And with that, we'll pause for any comments or questions from the commission. Thank you.
I had a question regarding the housing development. I think, in my mind, I'm having a hard time putting together a hospital, either owning housing or, is the plan to develop it out and sell the lots? If you could just expand on that.
Sure, yeah, and apologize for not doing a better job of explaining that. We're focused, obviously, on phase one tonight in that healthcare setting in the middle. The work that is intended to happen around us in the rest of the Health and Wellness Village is intended to be done by third-party development. NAH plans on retaining ownership of the land, and we intend on retaining ownership of that land mainly because we want to be able to be the ones who drive the vision. And we know that if we own the land, we can continue to drive the vision of what is going to make a successful Health and Wellness Village. So those units would be third-party developer built. They would not be owned by us. I think we may retain a small portion of them, and when I say small, I'm thinking 10 or 15 out of those 325 to use for our own purposes, traveling nurses, et cetera. We have a similar situation where we utilize some rooms down in the Verde region for our hospitals down in Cottonwood and Sedona, but the intention is that they would be third-party developed units that would be open to the public.
And I have one follow-up question on that, realizing that this is really a phase two issue, and which is not what we're deciding, but we've been asked to think about the entire specific plan, so that's why I'm asking the question. On the housing, a question that comes up a lot before the commission is, and we can only ask developers, whether they intend to limit short-term rentals. That's one question. That is a big issue in Flagstaff. And another question is, you spoke of the housing as being sort of, I can't remember the word you used, sort of part of the community, related to the community, part of the whole mission. What does that mean in terms of who lives there? Does that mean that you're thinking of it as housing for people associated with the hospital in some way?
No, we look at it as open housing, and when I say it's tied to the community, as Josh had kind of spoken earlier about the social determinants of health, right? Access to housing is an issue here, right? We've declared a housing crisis as a city, and so we feel that any project that can add to the volume is going to help offset that housing crisis. So access to housing is one of those things that we feel checks off one of the boxes of the social determinants of health. So no, the intention would be that it would be open to all. We do think some of our staff will be interested in using some of that, but we don't plan on controlling it in that fashion.
And as far as the short-term rentals?
Yeah, so it's intended to be multifamily housing right now. It's not single-family housing. It's multifamily, 325 units. We have not gotten to the point where we have worked with developers to make sure there's an economically viable model that would restrict short-term rentals. I think it would be a goal of ours that we would restrict short-term rentals. So I do think that's something that we strive for as we go out to our third-party developers. And I think by the time we bring our phase two development to you, we'll have a lot more context around that development around us to be able to firmly answer that question.
Okay, my guess is that a lot of commissioners would be looking for something on that.
Fair, thank you.
Commissioner Mandino?
So I have a couple of questions. One was related to, you're talking about outpatient services. There's a lot of outpatient providers now in Flagstaff, other than the hospital. I just don't know how you're going to work with those, because I don't see those going into the hospital necessarily. And so you're gonna have a big, I see it as competition, not a bad, right, healthy, it's competition, but, there's a lot of places on Schweitzer Canyon, there's a lot of places on the Mesa that have recently built state-of-the-art facilities to do their own outpatient surgeries. So how do you, I just don't, I'm not grasping how this is going to help.
I think that's a good question. I think what will be a little bit different about our ambulatory care center, and probably a clear differentiation between our surgery center and others that are out there, it will be attached to an acute facility. So we'll be able to do more outpatient-based services there. And there are occasions where you do get in trouble in an outpatient center, right? So there's case selection that happens to move to outpatient centers. We'll be able to do that a little bit different because we'll be attached to the actual facility. And when we are attached to the actual facility, if we get into trouble in the ACC, we can come over to the main campus. We'll also be able to have short stays from those types of facilities. So a lot of the ones that are here now don't have short stay capabilities, meaning that if you're gonna have a surgery, you go, you have it, you go home. This one will do that. We will also be working closely with our independent providers. There are many that don't have a surgery center or have not bought into a surgery center. And you're right, it is a very highly competitive environment. All the facilities you're talking about, I'm very familiar with. And what's happening for healthcare economics is the high margin cases are going to the ambulatory surgery centers. And what it leaves in the inpatient setting are the ones that are the $125 million of uncompensated care. So it would be irresponsible for Northern Arizona Healthcare to not try to participate in that service. We do have a host of employed providers as well. Orthopedics is one of them that would be willing to use that facility. So good question.
And I'll just add in, because I don't think we were clear about it when we spoke about it earlier. There is some growth built into that model, but a lot of this is existing services that we provide in separate areas that we're putting into one location. So we already provide orthopedic services at NAHOSC. We already provide cardiac services over on Thompson. We provide primary care and ortho services over at Oak Avenue Clinic. So it's a lot of it is a consolidation of services that we already provide from an outpatient setting in what we feel is a much better location as a one-stop shop for outpatient care.
So then that concerns me as well, because you have different places all over the community. You have the Children's Center in East Flagstaff. You have PT out in the county area. You have other facilities within town. So are you going to vacate all those facilities and then we're going to have a lot of vacant old buildings in town?
No, and sorry for all of the community members that have heard this talk 1,000 times, but really when you think about healthcare, there's really 4 levels of care. There's primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary care. And so the main facility will be a tertiary level of care, which is the 3rd highest. Quaternary is more like academic medicine, transplants, et cetera. The facilities you're talking about are really primary and secondary in basis, and so our view is those primary-based services, so you mentioned PT, imaging, lab, primary care, et cetera, those should continue to be dispersed in our community. So we'd likely keep something around the CHC site. You guys may or may not know that the McMillan Mesa property came up after the developer had some trouble there. We took over that space, and so we'll put some stuff there. And then Steve will be able to talk about some of the buildings that we do own around the campus. We will repurpose those or turn those into other settings.
Okay. The question I have is, when I first moved here, which was a long time ago, and up until, years ago, I'll say probably 20 years ago, it was more of a community hospital, right? And then it became a regional medical center. Why can't we support both? Why can't we support the continuation of a community hospital and another hospital in town built for trauma?
We quite frankly aren't large enough to support the economics of that. So we can't support 2 independent hospitals in the community. We are a sole community provider, as we talked about earlier, and that does come with some funding based on the number of Medicare patients that we talk with. If there were to be 2 hospitals in our community, even if we operated both of them, one, I don't think we would probably be able to do it very well because you would have not enough volume in both centers. But if there was let's say a second hospital came in and you lost your sole community provider status, as an organization, it would become an untenable situation where the organization we currently have, investing in services, investing in level 1 trauma, investing in pediatrics, investing in these services that may or may not have high economic return, we would have to decide what to do with those services. So that's why our recommendation is a new site and then repurposing of the old. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Have you based this health and wellness village on something else that is available in the United States that we could look at and view and?
Yeah, there's a few across the country. There's one in Michigan, there's one in Nevada, there's one in Florida. So there's a couple that are out there from a health and wellness village, multi-use concept. And again, there's not tons and tons of them by any stretch of the imagination, but they are out there.
Commissioner Norton, and then I think Commissioner Harris after you.
I'm glad you asked that question. That was one of mine too. If there were any other similar hospital campuses in other states that you had inspiration from or that we could look at. Was wondering if at the hospital or any place in the wellness village, if there's a mental health or psychiatric component and services?
Yeah, so we currently operate an inpatient behavioral health unit, and we're trying to get outpatient behavioral health back. We're currently working right now with NARBA, another organization, to do an assessment in the region and determine what we think the best delivery of that care is. In the actual physical facility, we're thinking more of a freestanding building for psychiatric care rather than integrating it into the hospital as it is today. So we still have to figure that part of it out.
Thank you. And then my other question is, if you could touch on the negotiations between Mountain Line for bus service to the campus.
Sure. So we've been having great discussion with Mountain Line for about a year and a half now. I think it started as a discussion with Mountain Line requesting that Northern Arizona Healthcare provide operational funding towards public transportation. We feel that public transportation is extremely important to the community. We feel it's extremely important to our development. I think we did have some disagreement originally on that. We didn't feel that private business should be paying for public transportation, the operations of public transportation. And I think we brought that message back to Mountain Line. We met with Mountain Line a few months back and their board. We were able to strike an agreement with them where we are going to be supportive of them continuing to grow public transportation in the region and be partners with them, but not pay on an annual basis for the operation of public transportation.
So what would that support include? When you say
Support for going out and getting grants similar to what we're doing with the city of Flagstaff, support in any policy making that we could help them with. Like I said, we understand the importance. We feel that we're partners with them, but don't agree. And I think now they may say that they don't agree that private companies should be paying for public transportation.
So this is obviously a monumental project, and this may have been discussed in previous meetings that I wasn't attending. Is it possible to make this project happen by just doing phase 1 and removing the phase 2 component so it's not such a monumental project and has such a huge impact on this small area?
I think the short answer is yes. I think we'd be shortchanging the community a lot of some of the points that we tried to point out. I think if you look at some of the things in phase 2, that's where the 325 units of housing is. That's where medical office space for some of the clinical partnerships that you're talking about with our provider physicians that aren't employed by NAH. I think we miss out on the economic development component of job growth, bringing new business to the community. So yes, we could build a replacement hospital and ambulatory care center for NAH, but I think we would be shortchanging the community a lot of the benefits of this health and wellness village.
So 2 items. I'm just, I kind of disagree with you when you're building this big hospital and then you're providing no funds for transportation to a transportation provider that's already stressed and already finding it hard to serve the community. And for me, I think, being in the nonprofit field for years, I think it's your responsibility to provide some of that funding. That's just my opinion. And then the other part of this is you talking about this village being located, so, and doctor services being located. So, we could see an influx of doctors moving out of the center part of town where neighborhoods, community needs their doctors and moving over to one side of town. How is that going to be addressed?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if Chris probably can't weigh in, so please don't quote the exact percentages, but for the bulk majority of the people that work at Flagstaff Medical Center, this site is actually closer for them from a commute perspective. There is some disproportionate share of physicians, and I think there's probably one or two in the community, in the audience today that live north and west of the hospital, which the commute is a little bit further. But I don't see physicians nor staff relocating out of neighborhoods to move closer to the facility.
So your facility, you're connected to North Star right now. I don't know if the hospital runs North Star or if that's a separate entity. If you vacate the current hospital, how are those physicians that are there, are they going to be asked to vacate that building? Because that building is frankly as old as the hospital. The hospital, it was built with the hospital. So.
Yeah, and we could probably talk all night about all of the moving pieces in terms of Nahas, Oak Ave, Mesa, Taylor House, all of these buildings, and we spend a lot of time discussing that. The way that the North Star building is structured is NAH owns all of the land underneath of that building, and the building is owned by a provider group. And so we've been in discussions with the owners of that building to figure out how to potentially bring that together as one NAH and then figure out how to disposition that, and then effectively move those providers from current location to the new campus.
So again, that's moving local community providers out of the community, to me. And then you touched on Taylor House, which is also a concern of mine, that you're talking about building these hotels. Great.
Sure.
We probably need it in our community as we continue to grow. But Taylor House was specifically built to be low cost to people families who visit the hospital. Will Taylor House be one of the parts that are moving with you? Can you?
Yeah, let me answer the first question first. So in North Star, and that's where it's important to understand primary, secondary, and tertiary services. So most of the providers that are currently in North Star are operating primarily at the hospital, or they're secondary, they're surgical in nature, right? So the surgical in nature would like to be closer to the actual facility. That's why it's important when we think about the Mesa and being primary in nature. So for example, we're talking and working with Mountain View Peds. So would Mountain View Peds want to relocate to the new hospital, or would they want to keep more primary services in the community? So when we took over the McMillan Mesa property, that is intended for like Oak Ave, which houses primary care, to maintain primary care, physical therapy, lab, imaging, all of those services that you access on a fairly regular basis close within your community, keeping those providers close to your home. Hopefully you don't need to come to us every single day for a knee replacement or a hip replacement, or are going to be admitted to our ICU on a regular basis. So those services that are higher acuity in nature will be located at the main campus. As it relates to Taylor House, I don't know as we've made a decision. I think we would probably keep that building for now and then figure out how to use that for our patients.
Yeah, agreed. A final decision hasn't been made. I think we would either keep Taylor House where it is and provide some kind of service from a transportation perspective for those families, or recreate it at the new campus.
So to me, if you're locating, if you keep Taylor House where it is, it's going to be a big problem for those people who have family in the hospital who are from out of town.
Not if we provided that transportation to
right,
them.
But
and
then
I think
that transportation is just going to have more trips in town, and out of town, so it's going to create more transportation problems for the whole community.
Yeah, I understand, and I don't, I mean, we were saying in town, out of town, I still think where we're located is in town, understanding there's not a public transportation line to it. I also think it's worth noting that we already function in that capacity now. Last year alone, we provided over 700 rides for patients who didn't live along a bus line and needed access home. We provide shuttle service now. We're committing to shuttle service at our future location. We operate Guardian EMS, so we're already in the transportation business, and we provide transportation to families and patients on a daily basis right now in our current location.
Your microphone, Marie.
I was saying I didn't see hands and I didn't see any more questions, and I'd really like to get to public comment before it gets too late. People have been waiting a long time. We'll be getting back to everybody. So I have some cards here. We're going to go call first on the people who want to speak in person. Remember, you have 3 minutes. And if you do want to speak in person, please make sure you give a card to Becky. And then after that, we'll take any online comments that might be waiting there too. So the first person that, oh, and also I assume either Becky or Alex, you're gonna work the button, the 3-minute button, or do I work that?
Nope, I got it.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
And
I'm so
people,
glad.
people online, if they have the ability to raise their hand, that's a good way for us to keep them in order. So when we get to online comments, online public comments, we'll ask them to raise a hand.
Okay, and you will be seeing their hands because I can't see anything over here. Okay, all right, so the first person on our list is Julie Pastrick, and I'm going to go ahead and say our next speaker will be Adam Weissel, just so you can be ready. So if you want to come up, Julie.
Whoops, everything's sliding. Hang on one second.
And before you speak, if you can just give us your name and address? And address, thank you.
I sure will. Let me put this away, this will be easier. Good evening, Julie Pastrick, President and CEO, Greater Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce, 101 West Route 66. Madam Chair and Commissioners, this is not easy. After all of those presentations, I have to comment. They were so great and there's so much information, so I'll be very brief. Our chamber represents almost 1,000 member businesses and more than 30,000 employees in the community. We're 132 years old, and we have been engaged in the process and understanding of the impact of our proposal here from NAH for almost 3 years now. Businesses and employees want high-quality health care for their employees. Through the years, we've heard many hard stories about the urgent need for expansion of service delivery and mostly facility modernization. NAH Village will deliver. This may be a Flagstaff-specific project, but it clearly is a regional need. We all deserve access to high-level, specialized health care delivered with the latest technology advancements. We're a regional healthcare hub and a level 1 trauma center. We know that very well. We hear about the incredible care that is given at NAH. But that must be updated with continuous advancements in care that involves all the newest technology, best practices, greatest physicians, surgeons, and nurses, and allows locals and regionals to benefit from world-class care. NAH will deliver. Village is a brilliant path forward we can be proud of to support wellness, healthy lifestyles, virtual, and again, world-class care we've seen on the screens tonight for our families, our friends, and our relatives. I don't think there's anyone in the room who hasn't had someone, a family, a friend, yourself, a relative in the hospital, and you know that stress that you go through, and the peace of mind I feel this project will deliver in some of the most urgent healthcare needs will be priceless to all of us. We can access care locally now at the next level, on time, quickly, and with high caliber professionals medically from around the nation. That this effort started. Thank you for your time, and we request you vote in favor of this proposal.
Thank you, Julie. And Adam?
Hello, my name is Dr. Adam Weiss. I'm at 1200 North Beaver Street. I'm speaking to you in support of the Fort Tuthill Hospital project. I've been living in Flagstaff and practicing at Flagstaff Medical Center for 7 years. I'm a cardiac anesthesiologist and the System Medical Director of Anesthesia Services. I have worked in a private group and as an employed provider with the hospital, but most importantly, Flagstaff is my home. Providing high-quality health care to the community is my top priority. I live in Fort Valley. I recognize that moving the hospital will worsen my commute, make call more difficult, and expose new challenges for the city. But like most things in medicine, you must consider risks and benefits. In this case, the risks are far outweighed by the benefit of a new state-of-the-art hospital in our community. Practicing in an outdated, undersized facility creates major challenges for patient care. Too often, we delay, cancel, or transfer patients because our operating rooms are too few and too small for the growth our community has experienced. Modern medical equipment has also changed. Newer, better treatment options require more space and more capacity. Until our facility can accommodate that equipment, we can't offer the highest level of care to our patients. Over the last 50 years, the current FMC campus has been repurposed, remodeled, and reconfigured as much as possible. The only way we can meet Flagstaff's growing healthcare needs is a larger, modern facility at Fort Tuthill. Although there's a vocal minority opposing this move, my colleagues overwhelmingly support the new hospital. Yes, there'll be challenges to overcome, but most of the physicians I've talked to agree that a new campus is the best thing for our community. That fact is also apparent to visiting physicians we're recruiting. Only days ago, I was asked by an interviewing pediatric anesthesiologist how we could grow our pediatric service line if he were to move to Flagstaff. Unfortunately, the limited space and already stretched capacity of our current hospital has no room for growth. If we want to recruit him and other high-quality physicians, we need a larger, more modern facility for the residents of Flagstaff and all of northern Arizona. For these reasons, my colleagues and I strongly encourage you to vote in support of the new Fort Tuthill Hospital campus. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next we have Sat Best, followed by Cynthia Nemeth.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. There's a word I've been waiting for tonight. I saw it up here. It said, "on the road to carbon neutrality," but I haven't heard a single word about carbon. We have a carbon plan. It's got a number. The number is 0. So this is a technical item in the plan. And to make the findings, I think that you have to be comfortable that this project is going to push us in the direction of carbon neutrality. So I really feel there needs to be an analysis. Is this just something that we passed because it was sounded great, or are we serious about it? Carbon neutrality by 2030 seems like a crazy, ambitious goal. On the other hand, on Monday, in the local paper, the headline was from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, And if we don't reduce carbon 60% by 2035, we kind of go over the edge. That seems also like a crazy number. But, you know, dozens and dozens of countries agreed to this result. So if I were sitting in your chair, and I actually do in the county, you've got to make that first finding. And in order to do that, I think we need an analysis of exactly what's going on here regarding carbon. Page 73 of the specific plan starts out, sustainability in practice cannot be achieved during the design phase. I think that's 100% wrong. I was at the Museum of Northern Arizona when we built a LEED's Platinum building that won an award, 2011, I think. And the way we did it was every single meeting, every single facet of the building, and of course it had technical aspects too, the collections building. We focused on sustainability. So it's got to start now. It should have started a year and a half ago. There are also a lot of elements below this in the specific plan. Lightweight concrete, mass timber, a lot of things that are mentioned, but we really need numbers and a commitment, and we need it from the beginning. You can't go backwards and redesign. That's not the way it works. So I hope that you'll keep that in mind, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. After Cynthia, we'll have Steve Vargas.
Yeah, good evening, commissioners and chair. I'm joined here today. First, I'm Cynthia Nemeth, Coconino County Parks and Recreation Director. My address is 2446 Fort Tut Hill Loop. I'm joined here by County Board of Supervisors, Patrice Horseman, Supervisor Begay, who is here. I think she may have stepped away. Supervisor Vasquez is here as well, Deputy County Manager Andy Bertelson, and other staff. And I'd like to say that I'd like my 10 minutes, please, because I am here representing a group, if that's possible, to start with the 10-minute
That's fine. Are they
clock.
all here?
Not all 10 maybe, but I'm representing a much broader group of people.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to make an executive decision and say that's fine.
Thank you.
Because I have a question for you when you're done.
Great. Well, I sure appreciate that. So anyway, Northern Arizona Health property is directly north of Fort Tut Hill County Park, and we're here, my position here is to talk about the protecting the recreational gem that Fort Tut Hill is. And we want to talk about this in the sense of traffic, protecting the boundary, the aesthetics of the park experience from the user's perspective. And so the boundary is something that's important to us. We want to recognize that through the plans, we've seen that some of our concerns have been taken into consideration, like the Mount Dell and Beulah intersection. We're pleased about that. We're super excited about the open space components, the internal trail components. Would love to see more connectivity there. The opportunity for transit, the bike lanes, all those things are really wonderful, and we think that those are wonderful opportunities for the community at large, as well as quality health. Some of the things that are still weighing on us is that traffic impact analysis and making sure that that is assessed with the events that happen at Fort Tut Hill. You mentioned the county fair. There are events like Overland. There are concerts. There's loud noise, right? So we want to make sure that all those things have been taken into consideration, because the traffic analysis that we saw did not take events into consideration. We're also concerned that that traffic may have impacts on ambulatory services to the hospital. And while the boulevard concept is beautiful and wonderful, maybe there are low-cost, easier ways to make sure that those ambulances have clear access to the hospital in times of need, such as maybe an open middle lane as opposed to a nice median. And obviously trying not to dissuade from the bike lanes, which we think are great, but a hard lane on the side might be helpful to act for ambulatory access. We also want to make sure that the Beulah and that north entrance, the entrance north of the roundabout is assessed in that traffic analysis. Based on what we're hearing from traffic engineers at the county, we're not certain that that has been fully examined. The signalization, the number of signalization along Beulah, we feel that that should be also considered and looked at carefully because of that traffic and the impacts from special events and that sort of thing. Might that be something that should be further investigated? I've talked about the vegetative buffers. Impacts from helicopters. We have asked in our specific plan, because we have commented, and that should be part of your packet. The county has commented from a variety of our departments, and those comments are in there. And one of the comments that we have not heard about yet, and maybe it's coming, is impacts from the helicopters. You know, we want to know what that might mean to our amphitheater partners, to our camping partners, and to our visitors to the park in general. The parks, it's a regional park. It serves a lot of functions, a lot of recreational functions, and we know that it's home to the Pepsi Amphitheater, the county fair, huge events like Overland and that sort of thing. Events go late, sometimes till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Some of the folks that live in that neighborhood, they know that, they hear it, but they're gracious. They understand that that's part of what life is like, living next to this regional asset. And so we request that acknowledgement of the existence of these large, impactful events are noted, and that we are not, in some future, made to mitigate those or to do away with them. And another important point for us that we just want to make sure that you get to hear about it, and we've also been able to comment directly with NIH. We've been fortunate to meet with them, so nothing is new to them that I'm talking about here, is that the northern part of the park, obviously that whole area is going to change dramatically, as well as that eastern section, right, that eastern boundary. And so we just want to make sure that both the Health and Wellness Village employees, all of the residents that are going to live there, work there, not even part of the hospital itself, development that will come thereafter. We want to make sure that those folks have access to the park, that we don't lose that northern access. And maybe that northern access is actually improved. Are there opportunities for us to collaborate, to incorporate a well-appointed trailhead there? And that would be a real additional community asset, and it would be great to partner with NAH and potentially even the city in that. We have also talked to them about a master plan, re-envisioning that northern section of that park. What does that mean in connection with the significant development that's happening directly north and to the east of that park boundary? And how can we together collaborate and make sure that we are looking at the best possible outcomes, the most functionality for that park, and what's to come, and not only from the employee perspective, but from the resident perspective. And we're already seeing a lot of activity at Fort Tuthill, and it's only going to increase. And so making sure that that our trail systems are still as enjoyable as they are to the people that enjoy them. So having Purple Sage there, a major collector road, literally between just feet from the sections of the Soldiers Trail. We would love to see some sort of collaboration and moving those trail alignments away from major roadways and as well from major structures. So again, to protect the user's experience, and that could be any one of us, right? And then, I guess that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, and protecting that northern access. I mean, that northern access is, I've mentioned that already, and I'll just mention that one more time, that being an important aspect for us. We feel that we're in favor of it. I mean, we think this is a great community asset. I just want to make sure that on behalf of the county and from the parks perspective especially, that we take advantage of opportunities that are there. That might be additional trailheads, making sure that we have ample access from that, we maintain that access from the northern part of the park. We see a lot of event traffic there. We see horse trailers, lots and lots of horse trailers, a lot of public works, heavy equipment utilize that northern section of the park. So just to give you a sampling of what that northern access means to us. But anyway, we're here, we want to protect, and I think I encourage all of us in this room to latch on to this concept of protecting this public recreational gem, regional gem that is utilized by people, residents in Flagstaff and beyond, and visitors. It's an important economic tourism driver as well. And so let's make sure that we're protecting its functionality, its access, and the safety that's involved in it. So with that, I thank you. And I'm happy to take questions if you have them.
No, actually, I think you answered it. I was planning to ask if at our next meeting, we would be able to hear from the county, because I did note your letter and the points on there, and I was curious to know about how many of those might have been addressed. So I think that, you know, you've talked through a lot of that right now, so.
Chair Jones, if there's additional information that you would like the county to bring to that next meeting, if you could let us know, and if that's an option, we'd happy to come back and talk
I think
specifically
it would
incorporate
be,
it into
I don't
a
know, I'd
presentation.
like to know what the other commissioners think, but I think it would be helpful if we heard briefly from the county about whether, how and if their concerns seem to be being met.
Okay,
Okay, thank you so much.
absolutely, you bet. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Could we also perhaps add to the next presentation how the traffic impact study is going to affect, if there is a large event going on, how is that going to affect the hospital and vice versa? So I'm sure it's probably in the study, we just didn't see that specifics, or no?
We requested that as part of the traffic impact analysis, and NAH concluded not to include that in the TIA, so it is not included in the TIA.
Oh, Steve. And then after that will be Larry Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Jones and Commissioners. I'm Steve Vargas. I've been a resident of Flagstaff since 1983. I'm at 3620 North Langdale Trail. I work at Gore during the day, and I volunteer on a few committees at Northern Arizona Health and Flagstaff Medical Center. And the reason that I do that is I have deep ties to FMC. In the 50s, my parents moved to Flagstaff. They were married. My dad was a quarterback as a lumberjack, while my mom was the breadwinner, and she was a surgical nurse at Flagstaff Medical Center. She told great stories when she was alive about her experiences there, the community, how they took her in, how they made her their own. And she talked about how tight they were and the quality of care that day in and day out that they provided, regardless of the time of day or what it took from each of them. Now, if you think about in the 50s, that was the old hospital on the west side of town, of the street, and it was a small brick building, and it met all of the needs. But, you know, I appreciate your mission, which is development and looking at what does it take to keep a community healthy? How do you provide health and wellness through appropriate planning and development? So the facility that was the old hospital, as soon as the community grew, obviously we outgrew that site. Now you had the option to be able to grow across Beaver and into the current site where the hospital exists today. You build a beautiful sky view, skywalk, and it has served a purpose for many great years. Now, as Steve and Josh talked about, we're beyond the ability for us to meet current needs. And so with that, we end up making, as a community, choices about what services we offer and what we do not offer. And that's at our expense. Some people feel, I've heard community members speak saying, What we have today is just fine. In my opinion, that's standing still. And standing still is going backwards because, as my friend Mike said, what we have to be able to provide in healthcare is what is being taught in medical school today. Not what do we practice today, but how do we plan for the technologies and the capabilities that will be delivered in order to keep up with the standard of care. So while we look at a new health and wellness center, and we think about it is a further drive than it is today, I guarantee you 15 minutes is a lot better than having to drive to Phoenix for special care or for lines of service that are already provided today that we could have to cut. I thank you for your time, and I'm in favor, obviously, of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry Kushner, and then followed by Whitney Cunningham.
Good evening, Commissioners. It's almost past my bedtime, so I'm going to keep this tight. Larry Kushner, 801 North Skyview Street in Flagstaff, and I'm reading this letter on behalf of Marge and Sam McClanahan, who live at 522 East Charles Road. Marge writes, "We have lived in Flagstaff for 55 years, arriving in 1967 for the big 7-foot snow for my husband to join the faculty at Northern Arizona University. Our son and daughter were both born in Flagstaff Hospital, not a medical center at that time. It was a charming, rather modest rock building. The east side of Beaver was basically vacant land. There were 2 OBGYNs, 3 pediatricians, 1 nurse anesthetist. Many of the family docs also delivered babies at that time. I share this with you so that you might appreciate the changes that we personally have experienced these past 55 years. I served on the FMC and NAH boards from 1987 to 2000, serving as chair for 3 years. I am appearing before you with this letter to give my full support to relocating the FMC campus of NAH from its present location to the Fort Tuthill site. Personally, I will find this move quite inconvenient. What is now a 6-minute drive from our front door. However, we are willing to make the drive as we have studied carefully and listened to the presentations over the past year and a half to better understand and appreciate that we, the citizens of Flagstaff and surrounding area, have a responsibility to the health and well-being of a community that is much broader than our city or our county. More recently, I was at FMC for a preventative care procedure. As I was wheeled into the surgery room, I was fully aware of the dungeon-like halls that look like storage closets. Post-surgery, I had a long, bumpy ride, passing linen carts, moving through the flow of nurses and support staff to my room on the 3rd floor. Total distance was probably equivalent to 3 football fields in length. It felt like Milton Road during busy times. Yes, I had a wonderful care experience, but it did not feel like a healing environment. I was in a 2-person room. My roommate did not use earphones to listen to the TV. Thus, I was awakened at 6:30 a.m. to the TV news. I could also hear her doctor talk about her serious condition. Some of the highlights over the past 55 years: expansion of the east side of Beaver, physicians, surgeon buildings, women's and children's, seeking qualification as level 1. Selfishly, this is my community. This is your community. I want the highest quality health care right here, right now, and I strongly encourage you to vote for this proposal. Thank you very much.
Whitney Cunningham, and this is, and I have a question about the next. We actually have 2 cases. So I'm thinking about public comments. You ought to, technically, you've presented them together, but they, can someone make a comment on each case? In some case, I mean, they are two different things, and my answer would be yes. So, okay, that's my feeling as well. So anyway, sorry, Whitney, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Whitney Cunningham, 123 North San Francisco Street in Flagstaff. I've been asked to share two brief letters from folks who are unable to travel tonight due to our recent weather events. The first is from Robert Porter to the Commission. As a Sedona resident for more than 25 years and a longtime member of the Sedona 30, I've had the opportunity to work directly with Northern Arizona Healthcare, and I am delighted to present this strong letter of support for their proposed health and wellness village, offering the following observations. 1, Flagstaff Medical Center has served Northern Arizona community for more than 50 years, and I have personally received treatments and procedures at the Flagstaff campus. 2, it is clear that NAH has outgrown its current campus, and there is no room for FMC to grow in its current central Flagstaff location. 3, I believe strongly that the proposed NAH Health and Wellness Village will ensure that Northern Arizona continues to have access to high-quality, state-of-the-art healthcare, which, selfishly, will be much more accessible to Sedona residents. 4, the proposed facility will benefit both patients and physicians with expanded health and wellness options, from preventative and primary care to highly specialized care. I believe that residents of Flagstaff and Northern Arizona deserve the highest quality health care, and I am confident that the proposed NAH Health and Wellness Village will meet our health care needs now and in the future. It is critically important for Flagstaff and the entire Northern Arizona community that the proposed Health and Wellness Village be allowed to move forward. I sincerely hope that you will vote in favor of the proposal. Signed, Robert Porter, Sedona, Arizona. Next is from Rick and Darlene Rocco.
Rick is here.
He is? Then I'm going to ask Rick to submit a card, and he can read his letter himself. I thank you for your time.
I have submitted a card.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next card, we have two cards, both from Michelle James, and that was hence the reason for my question, because she makes a note that one is for the specific plan and one is for the zoning map amendment. And after that, we have Marilyn Weissman.
Hello. I can see you guys over this. My name is Michelle James. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Flagstaff's Future. Our address is P.O. Box 23462 here in Flagstaff. I'm directing, F-Cubed has directed our comments toward improving the specific plan so that the community has a full understanding of the effects to our community of this proposed development. I was going to talk about what I thought was agenda item 5C. It was really about parking, and I want to think about that again and maybe talk to NAH some more about that. So I'm going to focus on the specific plan now. So the NAH specific plan does not comply with a very important regional policy, and the city's staff report clearly states that. This is policy LU.5.2. Quote, promote infill development over peripheral expansion to conserve environmental resources, spur economic investments, and reduce the cost of providing infrastructure and services. F-Cubed is concerned with the specific plan's lack of compliance with this policy. The Commission must carefully consider ways to mitigate the impacts to the community's goals if this plan is approved, meaning the specific plan. Secondly, the specific plan does not adequately address multiple other regional goals and policies relating to carbon reduction and carbon neutrality. F-Cubed is concerned with the lack of specificity and commitments made in the plan around reducing carbon emissions. The plan indicates eventual carbon neutrality of the hospital, but no date goal is provided. Further, the plan indicates that eventual carbon neutrality is contingent upon conducting an economic analysis to determine cost feasibility of renewable energy and storage systems. NAH makes no commitment to conduct the economic analysis by a set date and no commitment to use renewable energy by a set date. In fact, the combined application narrative indicates there's no plan to generate energy on this site. Inpatient hospitals are among the largest commercial consumers of energy and thus carbon emitters. This proposed hospital will be creating emissions prior to and beyond the year 2030. which is the city's goal to reach carbon neutrality. The lack of a firm commitment by NIH to keep emissions as low as possible leaves Flagstaff with a great amount of uncertainty about meeting the city's carbon neutrality goals. Accessible and convenient transportation to the proposed new hospital remains an unaddressed service despite much effort on the part of Mountain Line. The proposed hospital location is not an easily walkable distance for many in our community. The city indicates in its staff report that until Mountain Line is able to fund a new bus route to the proposed hospital, it wants a condition of approval that NIH provide a 20-minute shuttle service of some sort. F-Cube supports this condition, but we want to point out that the staff report indicates that despite this condition, concerns remain about how underserved members of the Flagstaff community will access the hospital. It's clear that...
Okay, so then if you also have comments about the concept zoning map, or were you saying you wanted to wait on that?
I wanted to wait on that with the parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Which brings up another question. At our next hearing, I'm going to have public comment again. Is there any restriction on whether people have spoken before? That's a big puzzling question.
I would ask that people not repeat the same information. So I wouldn't want someone to make the same public comment that they did at the previous meeting.
Okay, I can make that request.
I feel like we have a reasonable number of public comments right now, so I'm not overly worried that we'll be here till 2 a.m. listening to comments, knock on wood.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And Marilyn?
Chair
And
Jones
after-
and commission members, my name is Marilyn Weissman. I live in Flagstaff at 1055 East Apple Way. I want to thank you for your questions. I've been to a lot of city council meetings lately, and they're certainly are not as, you're much better interrogators. I also want to read and remind you about Regional Plan Policy LU 5.2. It's to promote infill development over peripheral expansion, to conserve environmental resources, to spur economic investments and reduce the cost of providing infrastructure and services. I think I can't emphasize that enough. I find it very disappointing that we have a policy like this, but what we end up with is land use being decided by those with the funds to buy up vacant properties out of the urban core and pretty much determine how they will be used. Northern Arizona Healthcare knew perfectly well that the activity center at this location was for suburban use, but they also knew perfectly well how to work the system so that a large, wealthy player could get their way. Without much discussion, the suburban activity center definition was changed to regional to accommodate them. And now you are expected to follow along and approve the rest of the changes they need to proceed without any of the guarantees that being on the periphery of our town won't burden city finances, the taxpayers, make Milton a parking lot, and severely affect our ability to be climate neutral by 2030. We're supposed to feel comfortable enabling all this because the hospital, quote, desires to put into effect our climate action plan, but we'll wait to see if those requirements are cost effective. Because the staff asked for a condition that the hospital provide a 20-minute shuttle from the last bus stop after the hospital refused to negotiate a fair share of the cost burden for public transportation with Mountain Line. And I find this kind of unbelievable because I think that this is something just like a fire. It's a need that we have in our community that must be paid for, and development must pay its fair share. You're being asked here to essentially have faith that Northern Arizona Healthcare will do the right thing by our town. Do they have a history of doing the right thing here? I personally have experienced the loss of physicians as NAH closes doctors' practices and buys up other ones, installing their own staff. Because of their monopoly status, they pretty much determine who can practice medicine by controlling privileges at their hospital. Does that seem like a good community partner, someone to have faith will do the right thing? I have heard about doctors and hospital staff who have concerns about this move, but feel they cannot speak up because they fear retaliation. Is intimidating those in our community who understand the most about medical care really the right way to have a community conversation about this move? I only have 14 seconds left, so I just want to tell you that I think that you guys have the option to say no to this because you don't have enough information. Pull it up to City Council. Let them deal with the development code. Let them deal with the costs and all the questions you've asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Christina Rainsford, I believe, and then followed by Dick Rokos.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for your time. My name is Christina Rainsford. I live at 1425 Cochrane Avenue, and I also appreciate all the questions that were asked. They really were in line with a lot of the questions that I have had through this entire process. NAH is asking a lot with both zoning modifications and taxpayer resources, essentially for initially only 35 more beds. We are relying on planning and zoning, we being the community of Flagstaff, are relying on planning and zoning and city council to make sure this is best for the citizens of this community. And what I'm going to state next is going to be very harsh, but I feel like it still needs to be expressed. I've heard time and time again, hoping NAH is willing to cover costs. In spite of what was stated by NAH as allowing for retainment of top talent and talk of provider networking, NAH has left a trail of pushing well-established, local, long-term medical professionals. For example, some of the anesthesiologists, local doctors who were once hospitalists, orthopedic doctors, and soon a whole group of pulmonologists out making sure that NAH is not only the only game, but in control of the game. Kind of be part of us benefiting our bottom line or get lost. I have concerns about what I see as the sugarcoating of this project with buzzwords such as improved access to care for the indigenous population, providing affordable housing to make this expansion more palatable, or increase its chances for approval. Excuse me, please. As a resident of Mountain Dell since 1980, I could go into the same concerns your questions have alluded to and also expressed in neighborhood meetings: traffic, light pollution, noise pollution, creep, et cetera, et cetera. I ask you to consider giving NAH the minimum they need for the hospital and green space regarding building heights and zoning. In my opinion, any future part beyond this initial phase, in other words, phase 2, seems to be for the benefit of developers and NAH based on objectives and goals these two groups see as a mutual benefit. Please be there for the citizens and community members of Flagstaff and what you approve and require, and not for a corporation that once truly was a community hospital. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next, Rick. And after Rick, Lorian Harrison, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Rick Rokas. I live at 1460 Black Bear Drive in Cottonwood. I'm in one of those little outlying areas. So I have just a couple of comments, a lot of good dialogue, discussion this afternoon, and a couple of perspectives. Number one, we have an aging population, and distance to healthcare is always going to be an issue, whether it's the existing facility to a new one or coming up from Cottonwood, as I have to on occasion, to Flagstaff. So keep in mind the aging population is going to have a difficult time, if not impossible, to get here. And then the alternate is to go to Flagstaff, and that's, excuse me, to go to Phoenix, and I really don't want to do that. So that's one particular point I wanted to make. The other has to do with attracting good healthcare professionals. You need a good healthcare facility to do that, okay? Quite simply, you got to have the capabilities for the resources that you're trying to draw. Lastly, I'm a Vietnam vet, combat vet, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, the rapid access to good health care, rapid and good, is critical for any patient, be it life-threatening or otherwise. So I want to make sure that you understand that that's a very significant point, okay? I spent 38 years in aerospace, executive level, strategic planning, operations, construction, things of that nature. I've looked at the plan. I have met and with Steve Ice, and he has come to Cottonwood to address a standing room only audience of people to hear about. So this is the Verde Valley now wanting to know about what's going to happen here in the village, and they overwhelmingly supported the information that was presented. So I think it's a good plan, I think it's well thought out, and I think NAH has the best interests of the community at heart. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lori Ann Harrison, and then Gail Jackson.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Loriana Harrison. I live at 1326 North Indian Valley Way. I am a native of Flagstaff, and I was also born at Flagstaff Medical Center. But recently, my grandmother got COVID. She lives here in Flagstaff. She lives in University Heights, actually. She got COVID, and she was too weak, and I couldn't carry her in my car to the hospital. First responders came to her home, took excellent care of her, and we got to the hospital, and they found out she had double pneumonia as well. NAH helped her get back to great health, and that was over a period of 4 weeks. During that 1 year time, she went to the hospital 3 additional times. And I know we've been talking about traffic, as it would be the opposite, right? To go from the center of town to where the new campus will be, there near Fort Tuthill. But every time she took an ambulance from University Heights to FMC, she got there very quickly. The care she received was great. I would be very sad if my grandmother was one of those 5,600 people that was deferred from the hospital because we can't service those individuals because we're at capacity at NAH as it currently is. Her life was saved. She's safe. She's 87 and walks 15,000 steps a day. So I know she'd like that new campus hiking trail that's going to be there at FMA at the NAH. But I am very much in favor of the new hospital campus. They saved my grandmother's life. In addition to that, my uncle and family members would have liked to have stayed with my grandma, but she had to discuss embarrassing GI stuff with a roommate right next to her, and then there were issues getting into the one bathroom that the 2 roommates shared with GI issues. So I know and I very much support that there will be 1 person per room in the new hospital. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next, it looks like Gail Jackson.
It is Gail Jackson. Good evening, Planning and Zoning Commissioners. I'm grateful to be here this evening. My name is Gail Jackson. I'm the President and CEO of ECONA. We're the Economic Collaborative of Northern Arizona. We do regional economic development. We partner and are supported by a multitude of public and private agencies. And our sole job is to work collaboratively to improve the economic vitality in Northern Arizona. So there are so many reasons why this specific plan is good for our region. And number one is it does bring jobs. Northern Arizona Healthcare is one of our major employers in the region. They provide hundreds of high-paying, low-impact jobs to our region. They are also, the healthcare and social services is actually the #1 industry in Flagstaff. This sector provides over 9,000 jobs. It actually outpaces hospitality and tourism. This project is good for recruitment. There is a worldwide critical shortage of medical professionals. Modernized healthcare system will not only help the hospital to attract physicians, nurses, and staff, it also allows hospital employees the space they need to do their jobs efficiently. It also helps other businesses that are here to be able to stay here and grow here, knowing that we don't have an antiquated medical system and that their employees and families are receiving the best possible health care. When there's a thriving hospital system and healthy employment levels, the demand for our schools and our housing and transportation, they all increase. If a company is looking to expand, they're looking at our school systems and they're looking at our healthcare systems. They want to know that their employees are going to be taken care of. I want to applaud NAH for looking at this village and doing what they're doing to take a proactive approach to healthcare rather than reactive. This is great for our region, for our visitors, and for our residents. This addition of the new space would provide opportunity for future and current employers to consider expansion or relocation. This is something that didn't exist with the infrastructure. Residents of Northern Arizona, we deserve world-class healthcare. And let's not forget that's what we're talking about tonight, is healthcare for our region. This village is supported by many of our partners, specifically in our smaller communities. They recognize the importance of having access to healthcare, not just for the residents, but the 6 million visitors that contribute to our economy every year. Planning and zoning commissioners, I strongly encourage you to approve and recommend this plan go to the city council. This project will provide opportunities to ensure Northern Arizona continues to stay economically vibrant, has access to high-quality jobs, as well as modernized health care. This is desperately needed for our current visitors, residents, and future residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And Clay McCaustin, or McCaustin?
Good evening. My name is Clay McCaustin. I'm co-owner of CAF Radio here in Flagstaff. Been here for about 30 years, and I think I actually had a class with Miss Bandino years ago. You were one of my instructors, so I'm a kind of full circle guy. I actually, the reason I got to Flagstaff to start with was because my stepdad worked at the hospital 30 years ago, and so kind of full circle, like I say, I came up here to be a CCC student, NAU student, and then kind of growing from there within the community. But I sit like you guys, I sit on a lot of boards, and I know it's easy to say no, and it's a lot harder to listen to all this stuff to really formulate your own opinions and to come to a yes at some point, hopefully for the benefit of our community. So for kids like me that are living here, whose parents work in our community, who are a part of this community, I think this is a great benefit for us to let this grow, to let this expand, because where they're at right now is obviously landlocked. Growth is important, right? You look at NAU, you look at other places around Flagstaff that have had to grow. So why restrict our hospital? It's going to hurt us as a community. Traffic, in my opinion, is going to be better because of those that are on the outside, the outskirts. Getting on the interstate is a much easier way to get through town than it is to have to go across, cutting through traffic. My wife was pregnant with our last child, and she decided that she might have some kind of indigestion. We were over at Del Taco on the east side by Safeway, when all of a sudden she went into labor, and it was like, oh my gosh, we got to go across town through traffic to make it up there, and we got there just in the nick of time, where I think if it was on the interstate, we could have got in and out much easier and faster. And so I think that works as a nice pipeline to be able to get to the new facility. I think it's going to look like a landmark when you come into Flagstaff. You're going to see it. It's something for us to be proud of as people come in and out of Flagstaff and Phoenix all the time. There's already a lot of events going on at NAU, so if you talk about the events that might be happening out at Fort Tuthill, I don't see that as any different than the events that are happening at NAU, right? The basketball games, the football games, the other things that happen within NAU's campus. There's always events happening in Flagstaff. I do a lot of concerts and events. And so I know that within Wheeler Park, there's events. And so there's already traffic, there's already congestion, but I think by pushing it to one of the edges of town, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to get in and get out for our purposes. You know, on your slides up here, you talk about making Flagstaff thrive. I think this is part of making Flagstaff thrive, is to let us grow, let us, you know, as a healthcare facility, something we can all be proud of. My mother-in-law was just had surgery recently. These guys did a wonderful job taking care of her, making her feel like she was at home. And I couldn't be happier with the facilities that we have here. Being in radio, we partner with these guys a lot, and I can tell you that they come to bat for so many different things throughout the community as far as coat drives and different things that are happening throughout the community. They're always willing to say yes and take it on as part of our community, and they want to be here. And so I would recommend saying yes. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And do we have online comments?
If there's anyone online, we need them to raise.
I'm sorry? Oh. Oh, I wonder if I went right past you. I'm so sorry. I remember seeing Maple.
Come on down.
Just come on anyway. I don't need the card.
It was it should have been at the very beginning.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Good evening. I'm Douglas Maple. I've been a pulmonary and critical care doctor here in Flagstaff since 2006. In 2019, I was the medical staff president, and my participation in the medical executive committee at that time afforded me a position to be in on the earliest phase of this hospital expansion. This began in 2015, when we were very full and very busy, largely because we had an active transfer center bringing cases in, and we staffed to full. We had enough nurses to cover every single physical bed in the hospital. Because we were so full, and I remind you, at that time, we were a 5-star Medicare hospital. We were among the top in the country, in the very same facility that we're in now, okay? So we brought in architects to see how we could expand the current building. They came up with a plan that was going to cost $400 million and really not add that many beds. And that caused some to realize, well, for $400 million, we can get some new property and start from the ground up. And then they realized, wow, NIH has $1 billion in cash assets. We can build a palace. And suddenly this became a need that went from increasing beds to how do we spend $1 billion? So now, here we are. A few things have changed since then. Number one is that the transfer center got downgraded, so we don't really seem to be interested in bringing people in. Number two was COVID. And because COVID was a tremendous stress on our staff, and because the system really did not take good care of our staff, we've lost over half our nurses. And then number three, the cost of housing in this town, as you know, went through the roof. Nurses can no longer afford to live here. So all those nurses that are left are really hard to replace. We have a difficult conundrum. We need nurses, they can't afford to live here. And I haven't heard any coherent plan for fixing that other than they would like to bring in nurses from the Philippines. They literally want to bring in nurses from overseas to fill our staffing problem. Still begs the question of where are you going to staff those nurses? Now, we have two new, very difficult problems. One is, for the first time in decades, this system is losing money. They would tell you that, well, this is a one-off because of COVID. No, we have a fundamentally flawed business design. We have an obsolete model, and treating doctors and your staff poorly is never a good business model. And number two, we've lost a tremendous amount of physician talent here. Now, my colleague, Dr. Weiss, would say that, well, most doctors really are looking forward to this. No, most doctors are leaving town. They will tell you that the quality of your health care is not dependent on building. The quality of your health care is dependent on the quality of the people who take care of you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. I'm sorry I forgot you the first time around. So do we have online comments? None. Okay.
Do we have the option to ask additional questions or a follow-up
Yeah.
on our part?
On one of the cards?
No, not one of the cards.
Oh, right.
I just
okay.
wanted to clarify or ask
Yeah,
a
I
question.
think we have time for the commissioners
This
to
will be
speak,
quick.
of course.
So there was a lot of discussion about the traffic impact analysis, and that was, I just want to make sure there's so much information presented. Was that the document that is going to be delivered at any time in advance of April 12th?
Yes, we received the last round. We've had a TIA, and it's been in review. So it just goes through rounds of review, right? So, but the document that I think we feel fairly confident that we're going to be able to accept and move on with was delivered this evening, and staff will have time to hopefully review that and be completed with it by April 12th.
Okay, so my comment on that subject would be that I do have a problem that it didn't take into account event traffic at Fort Tuthill. And I don't want to see a traffic impact analysis that has been cherry-picked. That concerns me. Concerns me the traffic on Beulah, especially with regard to ambulance access, because I know that the ambulances don't drive the highways, they drive surface streets. So I would be concerned about events and traffic on Beulah, and that Beulah, the 4 lanes, would be done at the same time that the hospital actually opens, so that there is access for them, because it would not work the way it is at this point. Secondly, has the county had a voice in the discussions with regard to the impact on Fort Tuthill?
I think the county can better address that question. Have we engaged the county in the conversation? Yes. Have we communicated with the county? Yes. Did we include them early in the TIA scoping? Yes. Are they an official reviewer or, do they need to accept the document? No. So that's our transportation engineering division. But yes, we've reached out to them. We've spoken to some of their higher level management as well. And we did receive their comments, and we've tried to go through those comments with NAH as well.
Thank you.
Do any of the other commissioners like to make a comment or anything before we close out? Is there anything else we need to do before we end this particular hearing? Oh, okay. Commissioner Mendino?
Is there a way to have Mountain Line be able to make a presentation about impact on their services at the next hearing?
I can make a request that Mountain Line attend. That's all I can do is request that. There is a letter from Mountain Line in your packet. And so I'm happy to have that conversation. Right now it's a funding issue, and it's going to rely on probably future ballot initiatives in order to expand transit.
And I was aware, probably it was either 2018 or 2019, when Mountain Line came with I don't know what meeting I was at, they were giving like a proposal of what might be when they were talking about Milton and direct access to the hospital. They were talking about some type of a plan that way.
The BRT, the bus rapid transit.
Right. So I don't know what they're considering, what the cost would be. I'd like to have that detail and, how that will impact the transportation plan.
Okay, I will do my best. If they're not able to attend, I'll do my best to try to answer those questions, but I'll ask them if they can have a representative to answer your questions at the next hearing.
Yeah. And I appreciate Flag Fire Department too coming here, and I just wanted to say that, I think that's going to be costly, and I think that's, if this plan goes forward, they should be paying some of those public services as well. That's my opinion. Just wanted to state that for the record.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to say that I'm looking forward to our next meeting because for me, the question is not whether we need a new hospital, whether we deserve a new hospital, whether we should have that. It's whether or not we can make the findings that are put before us. And the findings are based on, are largely based on our regional plan and the values the community holds overall. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion because that's a huge part of what we have to decide. There are a lot of, I think, unanswered questions, but this has been really helpful to me to get sort of an overview and sort of get my bearings on this project so that I feel like I can come back in a much more focused way and talk about this at our next meeting. So I'm looking forward to that.
And our next meeting will also be in person. It'll be at the Aquaplex, and it'll also have, the public hearing component, so people are invited to attend.
Please come, yes. By the way, I also wanted to thank all the people who made public comments. I can't tell you how helpful it is to hear your voices. Thank you. Anything else before we adjourn for today? All right. Until the Aquaplex.